Morena, good morning everyone and welcome to the Council meeting of Monday the 11th of April 2022. Terms of health and safety, if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the nearest emergency exit and the assembly point is across the road from the Regional Council building. Everyone needs to be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the video is publicly available on YouTube. If members remember, members and staff, oh look, you were all lined up there this morning. Sorry, looks quite imposing. Yeah. Can everyone remember, please, to speak clearly into their microphones and only one speaker at a time for clarity, and remember to turn it off when you're finished. And can everyone have either their mobile phones off or on silent, please? And can I welcome, I see in the audience there members of our CCOs waiting to come and talk to us. So welcome, nice to have you with us today. Carlo here? No, Shad, can you do the opening karakia for us, please?
Morena tātou, tuatahi ka tuku mihi kia tātou katoa, kua tauna I tēnei ata. Huria ki rā, ngā whakaaro kia rātou, kua whetūrangitia, kia koe rā Oscar me te wehe ngātu o tō māma. Katangi hia, kia rātou mā, nō reira ngā mate haere atura. Hoki atu kia tātou te ngora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā. I just wanted to acknowledge the recent passing of Oscar's mum and all of those that have recent departures from. So yeah, so we'll just start with a short karakia. Nō reira kia nui tātou. E te atua anei mātou aupōnanga ngia tēnei kia koe tēnei rā. E te atua ka tuku ngā whakamoemiti, ngā whakawhetai kia koe, mau manaakitanga katoa. Manaakitia mai mātou, te ake pai hoki tēnei hui huinga, kia whai hua, kia whai hurahi tika mātātou katoa. Nō reira tēnei mātou, tēnei kia koe, kōreki tō ngā Amen.
Thank you very much. No apologies today. No one in the public forum. We haven't got any late items. We've got no confidential business to be transferred into open. There's no change to the order of business. We have no minutes to confirm. Next meeting. And do we have any declarations of interest? Conflicts of interest? None. We have no deputations, presentations or petitions. No recommendations from other committees, which brings us to the business of today. And the first item is the CCO's half-yearly reports. And is it Anne and Josie or just Josie? Thank you. And we have those all as attachments. Thank you very much to the agenda. Morning.
Morning, Tato. Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to do any overview because you're going to be hearing from the CCOs themselves. The report, just take it as read. Bay Venues is the first off the rank, and we have Simon and Chad coming up. Thank you.
Josie, if you come on up, gentlemen. Just be aware that the microphones are quite sensitive. If you move your head either way, you see when Shad did the karakia, you can lose the focus.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Chad Hooker. I'm the CEO of Bay Venues. I've got Simon with us, who's our board chair. Thank you for the opportunity to present our 6 monthly or half-year update. So I've been on board now for 5 months, so this is my first half-year update, and really excited to be able to present this to you. And just wanted to probably start, because I know we've only got a short time, talk about a few of our achievements that we've had over the last 6 months. Now, obviously, this is with the backdrop of COVID going on, so there's been some significant challenges to the business, but it's always good to highlight the positive things that are going on. So in light of that, we've spent a lot of time working with the government regulations, and obviously we had COVID vaccine passes introduced at quite short notice, and we had to respond to that very quickly, which the team did very successfully. And equally as quickly, we've been able to now take them off. So we're starting to see things coming back in the right direction, which is good, but we still have some challenges there. Pleased to report that we became a living wage employer on the 10th of January, so at the start of this year. So that's really pleasing. We've also had, and I know Stephen came along to the unveiling of He Po Rarama, which was a art installation, a po that was installed outside the Mount Hot Pools. That was a great initiative where we worked with Ngai Tukarangi to do that. We got some Ministry of Culture and Heritage funding to help pull that together as well. So great to be able to help tell the story of Moa and the hot pools and how they relate together. So really excited about that one. We've been working closely with a lot of the team at TCC around upcoming projects. So we know there's a big, exciting program of work coming through the city, and just wanted to reiterate our willingness to be part of that and contribute and support TCC and work together in delivering some of those projects. We've done a bit of work to continue along with co-branding and making sure that Tauranga City Council is recognised as a key funder of the facilities. And I'll talk to you in a moment about some of the work we've been doing around our strategy as well. So that's an ongoing piece of work. I did have some photos here, which I just wanted to highlight because there's some amazing things that happen in our facilities on an ongoing basis. So there's a picture there of the Po unveiling. So just firstly highlighting that one. In the top left-hand corner, there are members of the Mount Maunganui Swim Club, and we got some really great feedback from the club around how we were working with them to help facilitate them getting into the pools for training despite the challenges around COVID. And in the middle at the top there is also some pictures of kids doing water safety training. And we had 8 schools come through and do a whole lot of work, and we were recognised by some of the staff at Water Safety New Zealand for having one of the best programs in the country. So despite COVID, again, we were getting kids through and helping them to keep learning. There's some photos there about the Midnight Madness basketball tournament, which was held just before Christmas. And down the bottom there, back from July, there was a major Kapahaka festival held at the QEYC, where we had a dozen schools and about 5,000 participants and attendees. And while we haven't had those numbers through in recent times because of COVID, we're excited, hopefully, about moving back in the alert level settings and being able to welcome those kind of events back in the future. So as I mentioned, it's been a challenging 6 months, and particularly at the moment as we're working through from a financial perspective. So we have had a real issue with not having events. So that's a significant part of our income where we generate revenue, and it's not just from the venue hire around events, but it's the revenue from catering and AV services that we provide for those. So that's hit us pretty hard, and we'll continue to do so while we're still at the red alert level setting. While we can do outdoor events, that doesn't help us heading into winter, unfortunately. So Speedway's been able to get back to normal, but a lot of our other events we haven't been able to hold as we would expect. And we know there'll be a bit of a time lag between some of those things coming back as well when we do get an orange light to let us start moving forward. So that has hit our bottom line quite significantly. So the forecast we've got at the moment is a $3.6 million deficit. Now that was previously $2.2 million when we last updated you in October last year. So it has gone backwards. Look, we're hopeful that we can do better than that, but it is just a constantly evolving situation at the moment. So we're working hard to manage costs and look at all options to try and minimise the impact, but it's just the world we're living in at the moment. So on that, we're looking at what our budget looks like for the next financial year, and we are seeing an improvement. We are expecting to be back into orange fairly early in the year, but there are still, I guess, the hangover from that, and how do we get events back up and running? How quickly does that come back? We're also facing the challenge of ageing assets, increased compliance costs, and obviously costs are going up in general, including wages, but that then flows through into maintaining our buildings and other programs and services that we need to purchase. And obviously we're getting the feedback from the Commission and from staff around making sure that we really have a strong community focus. And so some of those things at times come at a cost as well. So we will come back to you once we've had our board approve our budget in May, and then we'll be able to provide a stronger guidance on where we're at there. In the short term, what we've proposed is to have our loan funding increased to get us through the next 12 to 18 months. But ultimately, we probably also need to have a good conversation around what does the operational funding model look like moving forward, and depending on what the expectations of council are and how we deliver on that. So just wanting to, I guess, signal that we need to have that conversation in the near future. So moving on, just to touch on the strategy work that we're doing at the moment, and we had a session just last Thursday with our board, which was great, and you might note there's a couple of changes in here from what we've presented previously as we're kind of working through this. The main one there is that we've updated the vision to suggest that we want to strive to be the best venues for the Bay. So the other components are what you've seen before. So really just trying to give you a picture that we're trying to be community focused. We really want to get out there and connect with the communities and make sure that we're delivering a great service out there for people. Our draft values, similarly, we've done a bit of work around those. Really excited to be thinking about that from a Te Ao Māori perspective and looking at some concepts there. Now, this is still a kind of work in progress. We've been doing some good work with our team to make sure that they're going to buy into this as well. And we need to refine this a little bit more to make sure that we get the right wording around that, and that we're really clear around what that means for people that are working at Bay venues and how they exhibit those values. So, like I say, work in progress, but pretty excited about where that's heading at the moment. Moving on again, and probably a key area that we've done a lot of thinking on at the moment, and we're doing a lot of work with TCC at present as well, and the team there, is around the venues and facilities and what that looks like moving forward, not just in the next few years, but probably 10 years and beyond. We're aware there's probably been limited investment in some of that community infrastructure for a while now, and there's a lot of projects that are coming through, which, as I said at the start, are very exciting. Our focus is around taking a network approach to this and making sure that we look at all of these facilities across Tauranga Moana and that we see them as a network and not in isolation, and that they all support each other in different ways. A key thing that we're going to need to do moving forward is look after what we've got. That has to be kind of first and foremost. But at the same time, there's some really exciting opportunities. I'll talk in a moment around what we see as being the three key strategic sites and how they kind of fit together, being the Domain, Blake Park and Bay Park. We're doing a lot of work at the moment, or starting work around the Memorial Park project, which is incredibly exciting to look at a new aquatic facility and more court space on the Memorial Park site, which is obviously quite key for the city. And again, that fits with how do we balance those needs across the network. The community centres and hall strategy, which our board got an update on last week and were supportive of, and I know that's coming through to the commission shortly, which is exciting. And then finally, just making sure that we align our thinking and that, between ourselves, TCC, that we make sure things are lined up, that the investment is going in the right place at the right time, and that then will flow through into the next long-term plan. Because obviously if the funding's not there, then the strategy doesn't really work. So making sure those things all fit together. So looking at the three key strategic sites, and there's a bit of a picture that we've got here that we think fits around what's being looked at. So I won't go into too much detail. Suffice to say that the Domain with the proposed stadium there, we think that should be the city's key events hub, and that then helps support the central city if you can get events into that site. So there's no surprises in that. It can still then accommodate community sport, and it becomes a showcase for high performance sport. Blake Park, and I know there's a lot of discussions and conversations been going on that and thinking around where that goes in the future. We see that as being a really strong field sports hub, with being able to accommodate both community sport and high performance sport. And obviously you'd still have events there, particularly with the Bay Oval. So there's lots of opportunities in that space, and we're really excited about the role that the Adams Centre can play there, and having some good conversations with people around what the future of that looks like. And then there's Bay Park, which is probably potentially a really strong opportunity, and understanding that there may need to be some activities moved off some of those other sites, that whether there's the potential for Bay Park to pick some of that up into the future and potentially become more of a community sports hub into the future. So some really good conversations around that, and we just wanted to kind of put that out there to share our initial thinking around that we've been talking with Gareth and Barbara about, so that they understand where our thinking is, and we think that's aligned with where the city's looking at the moment as well. So we've got some key challenges and risks, and this is probably not a lot different to when we caught up with the governance session back before Christmas. These things are still largely in place. We've still got COVID, we've still got ageing assets, we've still got a talent challenge in the business community at large. We still have to deal with the growing city and the demands that are coming from customers around what they need, and balancing up those customer needs whilst also trying to be responding to that around technology and how we use that to best advantage. And then obviously the delivery of new venues will also present some challenges, both for TCC and ourselves, in terms of how do we manage that when we haven't actually built a new venue for a while. So how do those things play out? What roles do we play, and how do we work together? So while those challenges are there, we're certainly up for it and excited about how we can work together for the benefit of the city. So I'll hand over to Simon to talk a little bit about governance now.
Thanks, Chad. Good morning, everyone. And just the last slide, I just wanted to give a few observations from a governance perspective. First of all, thanks, Chad, for that presentation, and just a sort of formal acknowledgement of Chad, who's now 4 months into the role and doing a very good job. So we're very pleased to have Chad come across the Kaimais and work for us here in Tauranga Moana. So a couple of points I just wanted to make. The board were very pleased with the decision of the minister to reappoint the commission. I think from a board's perspective, that gives us stability as an organisation for all of our directors to stay on and can contribute to the way they need to contribute. The end of last year, we had a day and a bus together around all the assets of Tauranga to look at all the Bay Venues assets, which was a good bonding experience for the board, but also quite eye-opening to get out and see all the complexities of the assets that we operate. All of the board have been through the Tauranga City Council Cultural Connections course, which we really appreciate and highly valued. We have recently been working with Josie and Anne around the appointment of a new board intern, and we're pleased to say that a new intern, Saima Anis, starts with us on 1 May. Really pleased to have her here. I know Saima from Trustpower days, and she'll be a great contributor to the organisation and to Tauranga City generally. I've also been working with Carlo around the mana whenua representation, and we're progressing that and should have that sorted over the next few months. Anne's also reminded us that we have a board review process mid-2020, so we'll be kicking off that and engaging in that process in June to self-assess how we've been going, and obviously be providing that feedback to you. So that's just a few things I wanted to update you on. So open to questions.
Thanks very much. And I think, first of all, I do want to acknowledge the very difficult times that you've faced, but also acknowledge the flexibility that you've shown through that time. I guess from the events point of view, it's not only the setting, but it's the confidence of people to plan an event, isn't it? And you must be dealing with that. I mean, there's just no certainty. If you put something in place, it takes a lot of work and a lot of resource, and then have to cancel at the last minute. But the two things I wanted to raise with you. One, I was interested. I had to Google pickleball. I had never come across pickleball before, and I see that it is a growing sport. So it shows me how flexible you are, that you're up with all the new trends. But the serious thing is the increase in the security issues that you've had at some of your venues. And so I guess the questions I have for you is, are you getting a good response from from both police but also your local communities to keep an eye on that? And do you have any idea what is causing that?
It's something that we're probably just starting to become aware of, and it's been more isolated incidents around the venues. So we probably haven't had that conversation with the police to talk about it in a broader sense. But certainly they're always willing to respond when we need them. So no concerns in that respect. It's something that we're going to have to work on moving forward, just to make sure we've got that right connection into the community.
Any questions?
And pickleball, just for everyone else's benefit, is like paddle tennis, except a little bit more organised.
Stephen.
Thank you both for the presentation, for the work that you're doing. I mean, there's clearly some big challenges in the short term and around the COVID response. And I think Bay Venues has demonstrated its ability to engage with the issue and get on. The area of interest to me is that wider, more strategic, I guess, conversation about the venues and how they all work as part of an integrated whole, and thinking about the city centre redevelopment initiative, which in itself will accommodate community facilities, and how that fits with the community halls, the events and exhibition centre, and how that works with what happens at Bay Park, how we deliver the synergies, if you like, between both, and then the relationship of the wider venues, and in particular the Domain and the stadium, and how that works with the CBD and its future growth. And I'm really pleased to hear that you're onto that issue and working closely with TCC, because I think it's vital that we have a joined up kind of venue strategy, so that we can see how all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle complement rather than compete with one another. So rather than the question, just wanted to underline the importance, certainly, that I see of that work, and look forward to seeing the plan as it develops and grows.
Thanks for those comments, Stephen. I guess one point to note is having Gareth on our board in his new role is very helpful to make sure those linkages are retained. So, yeah.
Thanks, Chair, and likewise, certainly pleased with how things are going as far as we can be, given the challenges of COVID, but certainly where we were this time last year and where we are now. So really like to acknowledge that. A couple of questions, and really on that theme of venues and community centres, etc. So in terms of that strategic plan that's been presented to us, I think on Wednesday, I take it that Bay Venues have been involved in the development of that work and had input into it, and that's the community centres strategy.
Yes, yeah, our team have been involved in that and had a number of conversations with both TC staff and the consultant that they've been working with, and we're pretty comfortable with the direction of travel around that.
And just the final question, just in terms of your listing of key achievements, where you talk about the Healthy School Kai being re-signed, is that contract just for a year or is it for a longer period of time?
Those are new 3-year contracts that have been signed. So yeah, longer on that, although I understand there are a couple of schools that are looking to try and work to be able to do some of that themselves. And we're obviously open to working with them around that if that's their desire.
And just final comment, I'm pleased in terms of the noting around the co-branding in the venues signage. So
thanks, Bill. I put that in especially for you. The point I would make, Bill, on the healthy school lunches is that during the COVID period, the number of lunches have actually been down about 20%. You know that they've been down quite significantly. How long that continues for, we're not sure, but that has had an impact on revenue and profitability off that program as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And just wanted to reiterate, I suppose, the comments around COVID and the impacts, particularly on the business. I kind of want to follow on the theme that Stephen kind of raised about the strategic alignment between ourselves and BVL, but also thinking more broadly, and this is probably a question for all the other CCOs as well, is there are some quite obvious synergies between yourselves and Tourism Bay Plenty, and then there's obvious synergies between Tourism Bay Plenty and the Art Gallery. So will TCC have a role in terms of making sure that we're aligned in terms of the from a strategic perspective, in terms of our facilities, our venues, our sports grounds, our reserves, all of those kinds of things. Just wanting to make sure as well, at the same time, that there's those ongoing conversations between the CCOs themselves to kind of get, that alignment, and, understand where the opportunities might be to, whether that's in tourism or in events or with art, just ensuring that there's kind of that alignment across each as well.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we're certainly keen to work with our fellow CCOs. And I was really pleased to have Oscar invite me to speak to the Tourism Bay Plenty board a few weeks ago. So that's kind of a start in that process, and we've talked about whether there's a governance session that might follow through on that to just make sure that we're all on the same page. Probably the biggest opportunity does sit with tourism around events, particularly when we get the bigger events back, and how do we make sure we leverage that, and understanding each party and including TCC around roles and responsibilities. So yeah, there's some opportunities to make sure we get that aligned and working well.
Chad, I also just added another comment on that. There probably is some more opportunity to get brand Tauranga sort of going a bit better. That was something we discussed, I think, a year or so ago, but having sort of a work program around brand Tauranga would be a good idea.
And then just my final, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but appreciate the work that you guys are doing with around thinking about or applying a kind of Te Aomari lens to the work that you do, and then also all the other CCOs as well. But again, just trying to make sure that there's that alignment across the CCOs, working together with mana whenua, understanding their values, and trying to bring that in terms of the work that you guys do.
Yeah, and that's something that we're really focused on at the moment, and I've had a few good conversations with various hapu and iwi, and keen to extend that further. We're working with TCC on a master plan of the Bay Park site, and with Ngā Portuguese, key involvement there. That's something that we're keen to try and almost take a co-governance role and really invite them in to be a big part of that. And I think too, with our facilities, they're a great opportunity being in the community to give Māori the chance to tell the stories of the place and try and create that sense of place around what we do. So there's some big opportunities in that space, and we'll just keep working away at those.
Thank you very much. Really good. I think we've got a 6-monthly governance to governance coming due soon. But I just wanted to compliment you, Simon, on, I guess, part of our role as commissioners was to model good governance. That's been was lacking in council, but it was also lacking in the CCOs, and particularly BVL. So I do want to compliment you as the chair of the new board for bringing that board together, showing good leadership, but also melding that board into what we believe is a good governance example for the city. So you're sort of part of our role. But we do want to acknowledge that, because I think the new board is really making a difference to the way that BVL is taking its place in the community, working closely with TCC as a partner, and looking to make a real difference for building brand Tauranga, but also making Tauranga a great place to live and play. So thank you very much.
Appreciate that, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if we haven't got Botplas? No. So we've got the art gallery coming forward. Thank you, Rosemary. Nice to see you again. And Stephen.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Rosemary Prothero ahau. I'm the chair of the Tauranga Art Gallery, and with me is Stephen Cleland, who is the director of the Art Gallery. I just wanted to make a couple of opening comments. You'll know that we refreshed our strategy at the end of the year before last, and this year and these last 6 months in particular have been very much focused on developing the gallery to meet the needs that we've identified through our strategy. So the board is very focused on that. We have a very strong board. I'm really proud of how cohesive we are as a board, and we're about to, like the other CCOs, have a intern join us as at the 1st of May, and we're working very hard on Mana Whenua trustee. So those are works in progress, but it's very, very exciting for the board because we can see a fantastic future in front of us. Stephen has prepared a presentation. He's going to talk about our successes and our challenges. And I just wanted to signal that those challenges, of course, are the same that everyone's facing around COVID, around staff being off, being unwell, some challenges around what that means for us too in terms of gaining external funding. It's much more difficult to get external funding now, and you know we need to receive 20% of our funding that we found for ourselves. And also the challenges we face with the reduced footfall in town due to the roadworks, shops being empty, and we had the Wharf Street issue, and we're shortly going to be dealing with the construction on Willow Street. So there's a lot of things that we're managing at the moment, and I just wanted to let you know that we're doing that very proactively. So I'll hand over to Stephen, who's got a presentation, who's going to speak to very, very quickly, because it looks to me it's a bit longer than 10 minutes. Yes, we'll rattle through that. Stephen.
Thank you, Rosemary. Yes, as I was going back through our 6-month report, I felt it was perhaps on the long side, given the narration of these extenuating circumstances that we, like all CCOs, have been battling over the last 6 months. But I do think that this has been a really successful period for the gallery. So coming up behind you is a presentation there of some of our programs, which I'll just briefly work our way through. Naturally, a key focus of the period has been to continue our class-leading exhibition program featuring local, national and international practitioners. And a key focus of the period has also been to try to focus and acknowledge key occasions within Tauranga's calendar as well. So the RENA anniversary is a good example of that. Is naturally, we wanted to time this exhibition to align with that significant 10-year milestone. We actually began the 6-month period in changeover in preparation for one of our large-scale exhibitions of this calendar year. Manoa Takatapui, Defending Plurality, was a highly ambitious show that literally burst outside the front doors, took over floors, ceilings, and all sorts of places around the gallery, creating a really visually stunning and exciting exhibition. We worked with artist Shannon Novak on this exhibition, who is both a celebrated visual artist. That's his large-scale installation in the foyer there, but he also works socially and with the LGBTQI+ community across the country. And so it was a really good opportunity to challenge ourselves and to see how we can invite in communities that perhaps hadn't engaged with the gallery before. So it wasn't just a solo show. This is a show that included 19 other practitioners from around the country, very colourful practitioners in multiple ways. Teli Tuata there, Ariz Kaktai. We really tried to challenge local practitioners to work larger than they have before. This is a work by Paul Dara, a local artist who produced this brilliant mural in situ, one of 2 murals that happened to coincide with the show. And of course, nationwide, there's no shortage of high caliber practitioners working, Tanu Gago amongst them, who usefully blurs the realms between live performance on stage and in the gallery. We've had really good coverage across all our programs this year, from art staples such as Art News covering us to additional national coverage in RNZ and other platforms, which really draw attention to Tauranga as well as the programs we produce. And it's been especially pleasing to have the support of forums like Our Place magazine, who have devoted not only the cover issue for that month to our exhibition, but also a feature-length article, page spaces, and so forth. So I think this theme of collaboration has been quite big for this period. In addition to our gallery-based programs, as if that wasn't ambitious enough, we partnered with several venues across the city. To the left there are the flags that are raised outside Bay Court Theatre. To the right, a permanent work that results from this exhibition, once again by Paul Darragh, working directly in collaboration with Shannon Novak. That's on the Historical Village Road outside the incubator. And we wanted to take some chances. The left image there is actually a work that was produced at Bayfair Shopping Mall in one of their big skylight spaces. Once again, actually just being bold and venturing out into public space and trying to put the gallery's name into those areas. And on the left there is another more modestly scaled work at the Collective. So by the numbers, it's been a mixed year. We totally smashed our targets in terms of going, in terms of visitation, by venturing outside the doors. And I think that figure of 53,000 visitors is probably quite conservative. We try to take into account the fact that there was a 3-week closure towards the end of that exhibition. And it doesn't also take into account visitation and experience of those works beyond the duration of the show. So that's quite a conservative figure. But in terms of on-site visitation, we are naturally trending low, and we're absorbing those same challenges that other venues in the inner city have had. And those trends really continue across a lot of our other initiatives across the year. Stakeholder engagement events have been quite nominal by what we would normally do. Our education programs are trending well, I think, given the circumstances, and also approximately 25 to 30% down. And that results directly from confirmed programs being cancelled at last minute. So over 900 students confirmed in classes have been cancelled over that time. So pretty tough going, but we have ventured forward and been positive. During this full level 4 lockdown, we actually reached out to our communities. And I think one of the successes of this period has been to make more resources available in direct contact with our communities. This is a online resource that one of our teachers, Angie, our talented art teachers, produced, where from the basic materials at home, you could produce your own artwork. It was very well received from parents and our larger school communities over that period. But we didn't slow down, and this is the curious thing about the period. We nonetheless realised a major sculptural commission by Darcel Apalu, which is still gracing our foyers. This was a lead visual arts project of the Tauranga Arts Festival and really represented our commitment to working with key local artists on large-scale projects. There's Darcel there to the right. And finally, I'll just touch in terms of programming on some other new initiatives. We've begun to work with Toyohomai quite closely as a key stakeholder, and we have launched an emerging artists program, which specifically seeks to support artists who are fresh out of art school from this region. So the first of these is the talented Rolf Hediger, and we have other artists in the mix too. And of course, all these programs are responded to within our extended programs where children and teenagers and various people engage with those works, finding new life in portraiture, it must be said. But it is nonetheless a challenging period. So nonetheless, of course, first and foremost, the very general low lull in inner city visitation affects us quite significantly. And that includes low visitation across several fronts, impacts felt from the cancellation of associated inner city events. I mentioned before that we partnered with the Tauranga Arts Festival, but with the cancellation of those live programs, that directly impacts the larger visitor numbers that we forecasted at the beginning of this financial year. So we just don't benefit so much from those clever partnerships. Naturally, we've had to downsize our programs. There's been very little scope for opening events, for stakeholder programs, many cancelled education programs, as I say. And unfortunately, these low visitation trends have continued into Q3. In fact, they've perhaps gotten worse than so it's just naturally that means that we're unlikely to meet our end of year visitation targets. And it does all flow in, as Rosemary said, into our revenue streams. We don't have door charges on our exhibitions, except for international visitors, which are understandably a bit absent at the moment, but it impacts us on other ways. Some in terms of donations at the door, in terms of shop sales, in terms of numerous other activities that receive revenue from foot traffic. So it is a challenge for us. Perhaps some unexpected challenges were higher than normal staff turnover during this period. This has been the COVID period where it's not unusual, but for people to reassess their values and take on new opportunities. But that has really highlighted pressures on our HR budget line, and we're under pressures to continue to both increase lower wage earners above the living wage to take on our responsibilities there, but to also remain equitable and competitive across other lines in our budget. So that's just one that is particularly under pressure at the moment. And of course, whoopsie, it's a bit slow. We've really made, as Rosemary said, some significant interventions to make sure that we won't accrue a substantial shortfall this year. That includes reducing the programming for the first half of the year to take out some of those big fundraising push projects to ensure that we don't take on unnecessary risk at a time where it's hard to engage with stakeholders. And of course, also maintaining staff well-being. We are faced with enough challenges just keeping the doors open, keeping the front of house staffed during these times. But we're trying to roll with it. That in terms of some exciting projects in motion, the Miles Art Awards has kicked off, a much anticipated event on our calendar. We've trialled live broadcasts instead of openings. I'm not the best newsreader, but I've done my best. And all our programs have this kind of hybrid approach too. And one of the big successes I'll mention is that thanks to the increase in our LTP funding support from our last bid, we've been able to develop outreach programs across the Bay of Plenty. And this has been particularly well received across all schools that we've engaged with so far. Here's Fiona engaging a school in these programs, and each week we've found a really big demand for these programs. So that's quite exciting and something that has enabled us to continue to connect with our audiences across these challenging periods. And lastly, if the computer keeps up, I wanted to just highlight some significant appointments that we've made over this time too, from Megan Cleverly, our business development manager, to Leona Tupo down the bottom, who a young and exciting talent who's taken the reins of our front of house team. And of course, excitingly, we've attracted New Zealand-born curator Serena Bentley back to our shores, who's our new curator and exhibitions manager starting in early May. So Serena has actually been based in Australia for the last 14 years. And she really brings with her all these international contacts. So we are really primed to really ramp up our ambitions of our program further going forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, again, we acknowledge the very difficult times that you're operating in. I'm interested to see, your challenges, because I see half your visitors are from walking past. So if there's no one in town and it is pretty empty, then that's going to directly affect you and your revenue source, but also just your visitors and your community awareness of what it is that you're doing. But you've shown yourselves to be pretty flexible. Good to hear that the schools program is working well, and I'll open it up to questions. Bill.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to start off just really commending the outward focus that you've outlined, Stephen, beyond the gallery and in terms of those other opportunities. I suppose essentially, to a degree, taking art to the people as opposed to the expectation that they come to the gallery building, and also acknowledging the outreach and how you've utilised the additional funding. But I'd just like to pick up the chair's theme around, and on page, I think it's 21, you have that reason for visiting, 50% walking past, 21% new exhibitions, and 24% other. Be just interested in comments from either of you in terms of presumably a focus in terms of getting more people who are in those other categories, such as new exhibition visitations, as opposed to just the off chance of walking past. And I wonder if there's any comparator with other similar galleries in New Zealand, but more particularly what you see as being a way to perhaps address that in the longer term, in terms of getting more focus on the other and the new exhibition visitations.
That's a really good question, and I think our one thing that we're really reviewing at the moment is our comms and marketing plan. We have a very modest budget line for that, so we are hamstrung in some ways in terms of how we get our messages into the community. But as you say, we've been really trying to take the Tauranga Art Gallery's program outside the walls of the gallery, and I think we actually need to be louder and braver and try new things really across all our programs. So I think it's something that we particularly think could be an opportunity to work more closely with Tourism Bay of Plenty to benefit from the metrics and information that they have. Some of those conversations have begun, but I'm sure there's more that can happen there. And I think we're also looking to just do a full revamp of our marketing and comms plan, because yes, I think they're mixed blessings, aren't they? If you have a building that's like a nice standout feature in the Wall Street Precinct, then you do just get that nice flow of people coming through. But in these trying times, you have to think differently around how your brand and your message and your program gets outside the walls of your building. And unfortunately, banks, we have a renovated bank that we're in, and it's actually quite hard to get the messages out of the building on the outside, as much as we try. So it's an architectural problem, which may with the new precinct in development, may be something that we can address going forward.
Kia ora, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, just picking up on that theme, I was interested in the exhibition that you had at Bayfair. So those kind of public collaborations to try and that outward focus. I mean, one of the things we're focused on with the development of the new He Puna Manoa, the new library, was to try and get some alignment between exhibiting some of our taonga at the same time where we're people would come in and grab books. So and then as a chance to kind of step through. So when we get to that point of making a decision on the Civic, and then hopefully the community get in behind it and support it, is that kind of leads them through. So there's kind of a pathway of, yes, I've been to He Puna Manoa, I can see the taonga, and I'm excited about the potential of what's coming. And I suppose from an arts point of view, just thinking through those types of initiatives. So whether that's in a public mall, or I don't know if we've got any additional space in our libraries, but public spaces, thinking about how we can kind of promote and exhibit art publicly, that when we do get to that point where say the civic redevelopment goes ahead and pushes ahead, and all the other developments happen in the city, that there's that lead in, or that so it doesn't just happen. Actually, we've been progressively working towards that. So I'd be interested in your thoughts about those further opportunities, I think, to promote, collaborate, and display.
Absolutely, thank you. That's a very good question. I think one partnership that I didn't mention was a partnership which is still underway with TCC and Supercuts projects around the Sarah Hughes Commission, which is literally going to wrap around our building and extend out into Masonic Park. And those types of partnerships, I think, are just really wonderful to engage in, because the gallery can offer so much expertise. Our whole technical team has been involved in that project alongside, I must say, Sarah's more intimidating and professional technical team with architects, lighting designers, engineers, and so forth. But I think it really is a challenge of us working in partnership and identifying those synergies that allow us to work that way. I think the partnership with the historical village was an interesting one, because I think in some ways the resulting project sort of sits in between nicely the values of what the gallery prioritises and what the historical village prioritises. So it's partly about finding those alignment areas, I think, and I think there's no shortage of alignment with these other exciting projects that are happening around the city. We have for some time considered ourselves as perhaps a leader in developing culture in Tauranga, and with these forthcoming developments, we'll actually for the first time have a larger synergy around the community, which means we're not operating in isolation with the court theatre operating in isolation just down the road, but there's bridges that link the city, and those connections are absolutely fundamental to the success of that precinct.
Thanks, Stephen and Rosemary. I'm interested in your sharing your initial thinking on the opportunity that the Civic Centre redevelopment presents to the art gallery. Can you share at a high level?
Well, I'll start. I feel like I've got the microphone, but we think there's a really exciting opportunity there, and I know you and I have had conversations with my colleague Stephen Farron. Those conversations with council actually extend back nearly 12 months, I think, from the time that Marty and others invited us into the office. We have a letter sitting somewhere in the council archives which formally indicates our support and our enthusiasm for being involved. So I think we're really committed, and I think what I want to see is the opportunity is for Tauranga to reach its next phase in 2030, and I think that's the thing that I don't want to lose sight of in this process. So I really see our organisation as needing to grow to meet the demands of the city, and we really think that there's that's more and more the opportunity that we see in the Civic Precinct development, for us to work with council to work out the best way for that to happen. And for me, that is the exciting opportunity. That isn't without its complications, and I know we're working through some of those challenges at the moment, but we still think that it would be a lost opportunity if all this infrastructure that we have in place, with getting internationally renowned curators on board, with a team that's chomping at the bit and is really professional across all the operations that you need to run a class leading gallery in the country, for that not to reach its next phase, I think would be a lost opportunity in terms of bringing the best international projects to Tauranga, the best nationally driven projects, and of course local commissions as well. And so the gallery is in a really ideal position to do that, but we're literally boxed within a building, and I think we need to be bigger, and we need a bigger opportunity there that's coming through. Rosemary.
Yes, to follow up on that, we've had discussions with you, Stephen, and we're very clear, and as part of our strategy and our vision for the gallery, we need a larger space. We can see that as the city continues to grow, by 2030, which is when the Civic Centre should be finished, the community will be asking much, much more of us, and we won't be able to meet those needs within the confines of the small building we currently have. We're building expertise within the gallery. We have a very clear plan to do this that will enable us to move into move and develop relationships with galleries around the world, so that we can bring international exhibitions to Tauranga, and we would like to position Tauranga in that space. It's a space that's not really filled at the moment in New Zealand. There's some going on. The City Gallery currently has the F. Clint exhibition, which is amazing. If you haven't been to see it, I'd really recommend you make a trip down there to see it. But we can offer that in Tauranga. We can offer that in an ongoing way. We can offer showcasing New Zealand artists in an environment that has the level of prestige that an international gallery can offer. And positioning New Zealand artists on that stage makes their exhibitions viable for taking offshore, which would take the Tauranga name offshore as well. So there's this pull-push environment within the arts community that we could absolutely capitalise on. The timing is perfect because it gives us time to develop up our skills within the gallery to be able to meet that bigger need that we foresee within the community going forward. Really happy to answer any questions on this because the board of the gallery are passionate about this opportunity.
Look, thank you very much for that. And I know you're continuing to work with the teams as we develop the ideas around the Civic site. We've been out and about consulting with the public. I was just thinking, I was at the crossing on Saturday with the staff talking to people about, the Civic Centre. And they're huge, big spaces that are pretty soulless. So really pleased to see your boldness with Bayfair. So it's not just collaboration with other public sector, but it's great to see that art. And must be huge opportunities to go out into some of those big spaces and do some really exciting things because they're all the same. Doesn't matter where you are in the country, they all look the same. Be nice to have some different from Tauranga. Rosemary, to you, can I make the same comment about governance? It is important that we all demonstrate what good governance actually looks like. And I think you've got your board working really well, really focused on working collaboratively across the city, but with a very clear vision for the future, keeping that high level, all the things that good governance is about. So that's really important to us, and it's really important that Tauranga has those examples of what it looks like as we work back towards full democracy. So well done, and thank you for all your efforts. Thank you very much. So Oscar, that brings you to the table. And Russ is Deputy Chair, filling in today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Everyone appreciates we have given you longer than 10 minutes. Just saying.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you for the opportunity to present our 6-monthly report today. My name's Russ Brown. I'm the Deputy Chair at Tourism Bay of Plenty, and Oscar doesn't need much of an introduction, but he's obviously our General Manager. It was 6 months ago in July 21 that Oscar was taken on in his role as GM, and that can get forgotten a little bit in everything that's been going on recently. So we've welcomed Oscar on board into that GM role back in July 21, and this is very firmly his report coming through our board to you today. Like all commercial operations, we've been dealing with COVID and disruption. You've heard that from the two previous CCOs, and it's no different within our board and within our operations. At the same time, I guess we've been taking the opportunity to plan and refresh and prepare ourselves for the changes that are coming as the borders do reopen. And Oscar will take you through that detail in terms of how we've gone over the last 6 months and where we're heading with that. From a high level point of view, domestic tourism has been hard in the last few while. The unsettled local markets out of Auckland, Hamilton, with lockdowns and red zones and every other generic kind of nature that's come through, has been quite hard work. We're really excited that at the moment we've got Flavours of Plenty going on, and that it's had a really fantastic opening, and it's nice to see the community out and supporting these events again as a sign of what we just simply need more of. From an international tourism side, the borders still remain firmly closed, but there's that glimmer of light coming on the 14th of April when we welcome back our Australian friends, and we see that border continuing to progressively reopen through the year. So at a board level and at an operational level, we're firmly working on how we can make the most for our region in terms of how that opens, and continue to work through our destination management arching theories, which we put in place several years ago now. Finally, for me, it's been a case of improving and building on our stakeholder relationships and the collaboration which comes. And we welcome the commissioners coming on board and helping encourage that and facilitate that in some ways. So for us, the ability to collaborate with our other CCO partners is huge. And I think when you sit here and you listen to the two previous presentations, you can really see the overlaps that we can benefit from by working together. So that's probably enough from me. I'll hand over to Oscar, who can take us through our 6-monthly report.
Kia ora, Russ. Kia ora tātou, e te tuatahi, tēnā koe shared mō tō mihi mana ki au. Me ki rā nā rangatira o te kaunihera, the rangatira matua, tēnā koutou, me ki ngā mema o te komihia, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora everybody, thank you Russ for that introduction. It has been an interesting 6 months, and I won't labour more on sort of the overview other than to say it really has meant that we've had to cut our cloth based on what we were able to do. So to put it in sort of reality perspective, the opening, the closings, the red zones, the non-red zones, that impacts a lot on what we can do in market and what we couldn't do in market. So we shifted a lot of our focus, and as we've got on that slide up there, and I think I'm going to work through Robin to try to coordinate properly in terms of the timings. So we can hold on this one for a second. We have got 4 sort of pillars around targeting the right people at the right time with the right messages. And that was an absolute, challenge to do over the 6-month period, because you really didn't know any of those things, and the propensity for those people to travel. So we focused more on connecting with residents, working with our operators in terms of enhancing the experiences and trying to grow the capacity. And that's also been challenging too, because you need to be real about the propensity of smaller operators to be in business, to sustain cost of service as well as staffing, and then having an entity like us that's well-meaning to try to grow them, but at the same time them having the other problems of the world on their shoulders as well. So it was trialling, but we got through it, and I think the feedback that I'll be able to report on will be positive. So if we go to the next slide, or PowerPoint, thank you, I'm sorry, PDF. Essentially, in terms of, so if we start working our way down from the performance of the region, we actually didn't do too badly at all. Actually, in comparison to our comparison set of other Central North Island regions, we actually outperformed everyone else. I'm going to be pragmatic in that. We have got a region that when the sun comes out and Kiwis want to come on holiday, they come here. So I'm not going to claim that in 6 months. But at the same time, it's great to see that, we are holding our own. And if you look at that bottom sort of graph there, in terms of, as you would expect, every visitor spend to drop between the comparative years of 2020 and 2021, we sustained ours relatively well. And we managed to ensure that, at the end of the day, we were top of mind as a visitor destination, and we had campaigns that were going out around that. We changed out things, as most people had to, in terms of backing tracks and things like that. So we used our next local favourites, LAB, who have just had sellout concerts in the east coast of Australia at the moment. We've got access to one of their backing songs, and it really resonates with who we are as a destination as well, and that crossed over as well. The interesting sort of note there is, the 19% increase in visitor spend. People always look at these metrics and they say, well, how come you get 19% increase in visitor spend if the international borders weren't open? And we asked our statisticians in that space, and a lot of that is repatriating Kiwis that are still using the cards that they had issued from overseas. And that happens all the time in statistics. So if we go to the next slide, please. In terms of our KPI performance, and this was something I definitely know that I enjoyed, and so did the board, was a tightening of our KPIs from next year onwards. I think having 33 is maybe 23 too many. So essentially 26 of them are on track, and we have varying degrees of sort of being able to say some of those have been sort of completed, some of those are ongoing, but ultimately 26 are on track. 5 were at risk. They're no longer at risk. And the reason why I can say no longer is now we know with certainty that things are lifting. There was a lot of activity we couldn't do. And out of those 5 that were at risk at the time, they were around our social license sort of surveying and impacts that we need to do with our community and our stakeholders. They're also around visitor perceptions that we're now able to undertake because we can do more face-to-face, and our stakeholder engagement. We had a very heavy metric in there about both the board and myself predominantly getting out face-to-face with everybody, and we had to hold off on that over those 6 months, but I'm pretty much at a rate of knots going to catch up on that one over the next remaining 4 months. So that's our KPIs. The 2 that weren't achievable are a direct impact of COVID. One of those metrics was around cruise visitation over the 21-22 summer season. Well, there was none. And the other was a deferred sort of auditing through Polmark, through our eyesight and other things, and they've deferred that to July, which will come out of this reporting period. So if you go to the next slide, please. In terms of financials, and have a deputy chair here who is very much as diligent over our books. We're in a overall surplus, and we're ahead of budget, but we expect that to erode in the second half of the 6 months. Again, the summary on the financials is a lot of deferred activity, and you just wouldn't do that in all good consciousness when people couldn't actively travel and make those decisions. So now we can, and we are, and we will. And we've retained our working capital ratio of no less than what's been prescribed for us, and we're quite confident about that delivering through to the financial year end. So if we could probably slide through the next 2 slides, because one's around key achievements, so you can see that one, and I'll get to the key achievements. So some of the milestones that we have achieved over that 6-month period, we did really nail down a realignment of the organisation based on the demands of destination management and our auspice to market and attract people. We managed to attract quite very good talent to the organisation, and at the same time we've got probably about 3 roles that we haven't filled as yet, and we're looking at some sort of economies of scale in there with some of what we want to do and the skill set we've been able to attract. In terms of product experiences, and Manoa will need to comment on this later on as well if you ask, but around our product development and partnering both with local operators and with councils, particularly around sort of cycleways and things like that, and waterfalls and so forth. We actually made sure that we were able to deliver on where people were at. So we did deliver a consumer collateral for Western Bay prior to going into the summer season. They were ready for that to be produced. Our intention is absolutely to do the same with TCC when that is ready to be produced as well, in terms of the detail of what needs to go into the map and the approvals. So that's, and we've got working groups. So our team is now aligned quite closely to TCC to make sure that we can deliver on that. And our intention is to deliver on that by, I think we've set a date in September, so that we're ready both for the upcoming season coming into summer and also the propensity of cruise return, and I'll talk about that a little more shortly. The other thing we've managed to deliver is the capability and development and campaign activations around the MB funding that we've received. That's due to conclude at the end of the December year. That was extended a little bit across all 30 RTOs or regional tourism organisations, principally due to delays in COVID. And one thing through our deputy chair that was mentioned, and I know some of you have sort of had a taste of that, excuse the pun, is our Flavours of Plenty Festival. So that's a classic example of us working with strategy, with our passion group, which is made up of community, them identifying that why is there any reason that a region like ours that's so rich in horticultural provenance shouldn't have its own festival similar to Fork or Wellington on a Plate or whatever. We had to, second guess ourselves and think about it in those 6 months of this report, because at that time nothing was known, and we made the decision, no, bugger it, we're going to stick with it, and someone needs to stand up when everything else is unsteady. And respectfully, I think that's proven the right decision. We ran circa of 30 events. They all had to be under the 100 threshold. By the time we started the festival, we could have had events way over the 100 threshold, but it was too late. But ultimately, the feedback we're getting has been fantastic, and we sold out over 50% of the sellable events were sold out, and it's created a very good platform for us to build on going forward. So we're happy about that. Next slide, please. Other milestones is, over the period we managed to deliver as best we could on the contestable regional events fund. We partnered with, we had decision makers from TCC, Western Bay and Whakatane around the table with us as we decided where to invest into those events. Unfortunately, again, due to COVID restrictions, some of those were deferred and pushed back, but you do the best with what you have and what you can. And we also managed to partner an additional 200,000 with TECT as part of that. So we turned a $500,000 fund into a $700,000 fund, and that was over 3 years. We also enabled quite a few sort of iwi hapu developments, and one of them is was a signing of a MOU between a local hapu and an award-winning tourism operator in and around some cultural development and employment opportunities. That discussion is also happening, as I understand it, in another part of this building at the moment in terms of consents and processes. So yeah, we are delivering on what we've been asked to do in that space. We also went into summer reactivating the Mount iPod, but this time I got the team to partner with Mount Main Street and be a lot more sort of collective in the way in which we could put activations in place. So they weren't just our tourism activations, that they were also working with communities and groups and others. And it was a really great vibe down there. If anyone got down there, you would have seen that. And finally, just want to acknowledge the team. They continue to deliver tirelessly on our domestic campaign, and both in online and digital, and working quite heavily. So we didn't lose any traction at all in terms of the eyeballs on the destination and the visitation. Next slide, please. I won't touch too much on other deliverables. I'll just very quickly say that there was a lot going on. We sort of literally, when you can't get together with people, you do things predominantly in the digital space to maintain your presence and awareness. And we did a lot of that, and you can read that for yourselves in there. One of the things, probably the final point to note, is we are making huge inroads on our iwi liaison and engagement activity across the board. We're ensuring that we're working with each of the major iwi and hapu. We've had discussions with the likes of Toikairawa and a whole bunch of others in terms of crossing over programs where we can deliver, and also through the MB funding deliver, but we're also not crossing over and making the most of what other people are doing with their programs. So if I could move 2 slides, and that'll be it from me, and I'll just talk briefly about what's ahead and then face any questions. I suppose what's ahead, so top of the page is reopening of the borders Thursday. So that starts. A reality check, we're not going to get a flood of people. And if anyone knows anybody that's tried to come over across the Tasman in the last sort of 2 weeks, even since the openings, the issue is not the flights, the issue is actually the COVID restrictions and the protocols of the paperwork. It's quite clunky for many people still, and you would have seen maybe the stories on Kingsford Smith Airport in Sydney 2 days ago with lines queuing out right outside. So there's a lot of things that still need to be worked through, but we're putting those campaigns in place. So we're expecting things not to sort of start hitting the ground until another 2 months. The first month and a half will be really attrition of visiting friends and relatives, finally getting to see each other. The other thing is around establishing our regional tourism capacity. So we need to be real about what's happened over the since March 2020 to now, is what is the capacity of our industry? Whilst we've been sort of engaged with them, now they've actually had a line in the sand drawn for them. We can actually start working on what's your propensity for general tourism, what's your propensity for business events, what's your propensity to partner with us on sort of major events and other things that we can be doing in that space. Regenerative return of 2.0 cruise, and I do use the term regenerative. So we've got an ongoing program that we've been working with. I got appointed in July to this role, and then I managed to get appointed to the board of Cruise New Zealand in September. And that was very much to keep an eye on the ball of what's happening globally, what will happen with New Zealand, and what's the implications for Tauranga. So we've got a work group that we've set up with ourselves, TCC, Port of Tauranga, Cruise New Zealand, the cruise lines and operators. Over the next couple of months, we'll be facilitating visitor perception on social licence, so our residents' perception on the community well-being and return of cruise. We'll also be looking at we're working with Cruise New Zealand, MB and Regional Tourism New Zealand. There's 6 road shows that are being facilitated across the country in terms of the return of cruise. So we'll be having that discussion with them and also our community. And essentially we'll be putting a report through by the 29th of June that will give us a snapshot, as much as we know by that point, as to have things actually improved and what's the propensity of it. So just to be really upfront, you will hear a lot of interesting sort of terms around the bookings for cruise. And at the moment, if you looked into the booking schedule, there's probably excess of just over 100 bookings. That does not mean that's the reality of what's coming. So unlike aviation, the government has not opened the maritime borders for cruise. So that's why it's a work in progress. We've got to keep an eye on it. And probably the other things in there, definitely work groups with the precincts in terms of the civic precinct development, and Gareth has got me engaged in quite a few of those work groups, and I'm looking forward to sort of throwing in more weight in there. My team and I met with Wayne Silver and Verity, his PA, not long after the presentation that you made a couple of months ago, to really work out where we can best leverage and add some value, particularly around our intel around, you know, what would make a vibrancy, similar to the comments that Stephen was making previously around bringing life to that area. And that all flows through with some of the storytelling and wayfinding engagement that we're doing in collaboration with iwi. We're working quite heavily with Carlo at TCC and crossing over a lot of the programs so that we can really have a strong regional story. And final comment around that is, yeah, I suppose we have really taken on board the governance to governance meeting that we did have about not just working smarter ourselves, but working more collectively with our CCO partners. So you might have heard that. So I've had invited CEOs to speak to our board. We held a launch of the program of Flavours of Plenty at the Art Gallery. We're really just trying to make sure that we're not stepping on each other's lanes, but knowing how to maximise each other's lanes and do good. So kia ora, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Oscar. And I have to say, the experience last night at the Clarence of that Taste of Plenty is just incredible. And you're quite right, this area has so much abundance of natural resources, including wine. Although I do note that most of the wine came from Hawke's Bay, but you know, just saying. It was
through Mills Rick. It was yeah. Grapes are sourced from other.
Yes, that's right. But good on you for having the courage to go ahead with that, and I think it is the start of something really, really good. My question, I was just trying to find it in your report, but there was just a little note in your report that that said that you were looking for a way to be involved as the borders opened in that international marketing, and that Tauranga needs to be in that. I just couldn't find it this morning. I thought I had a tag on it, but I've lost it. Could you just expand on that a little bit, and what you think the opportunity is and what you're doing about that?
Yep. So when it comes to international markets, we, our main partner is Tourism New Zealand. We collaborate also with the Central North Island group of 8 regions. So you can take, Hamilton, Waikato, Coromandel, Rotorua, you can go both ways. Predominantly, though, we work with our Pacific Coast Highway partners. So you get to Auckland, you've got the choice of turning left and you go around Coromandel and you come around to Bay of Plenty, and then you get down to the East Coast and then Hawke's Bay. So we work as collectives, what we call IMAs, or International Marketing Alliances. That way we pool our limited resources together. We partner with Tourism New Zealand. So the marketing team's been very clinical, because I've asked them to be very clinical, because I've been around a while, and respectfully know that Tourism New Zealand's been in abeyance for maybe 2 years. And all of a sudden, as soon as the borders open, they want to do everything yesterday. And they'll make everything sound like it's very shiny and very, immediate to produce a result. For those of us that have been around, we're sort of dissecting through that and saying, well, let's look at some better longevity projects. So as an example, I've got none of my staff are heading offshore prior to the end of this financial year. They will start from July, and that's more around targeted areas around business events and around some of the campaign activations that we can get done leading into our season. Nothing that will happen between now and the next couple of months is really going to directly impact us, because we're in the wrong element. Australians are going to be interested in finally putting on their skis and getting to Queenstown and those sorts of places. So for us to be sort of heavily involved at this point is not going to be worthwhile. So we're quite clinical in that, but we do partner. Hopefully this answers your question. We, for instance, with Flavours of Plenty over this weekend, one of the things we can do is I had my whole team out over the weekend and we broke the team into business events team and trade events, and we hosted various trade inbound tour operators, and we hosted business events coordinators and conference organisers, and we showcased not just the Flavours of Plenty festive activities, but also we joined that with things you can do. So we had people out paddle boarding, we had people out on Mokohama, we had people sort of visiting other locations and just joining that together. So you really got to cut your cloth based on what you can do. Yeah, but we don't do international marketing by ourselves. We can't afford it. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of comments first. Really commend you on the Flavours of Plenty initiative. Went to an event on Thursday night, full house, people from over the hill, and I was probably one of the oldest there. It was an interesting demographic in terms of who was at the event. Be that as it may. Just like to acknowledge what you're proposing, Oscar, around the future work around collateral in terms of the trails, cycle trails. I was full of enthusiasm when I saw the cycle trails, Western Bay of Plenty, and then there was a big gap in the middle in terms of trails in the city or lack thereof. So really appreciate that's you're working on that. Key to that, and you do mention it also in your report, is the wayfinding, signage and interpretation. So as you go along, you can actually read the stories, you know where you're going, and you know where the various parts of the network connect up. So I just wanted to re-emphasise that. My only question, though, is around the Regional Events Fund. Just wanted a bit more in terms of whether that's all expended and finished, or whether that initiative is still underway with a defined endpoint.
Great question. So essentially the Regional Events Fund was a one-off fund. So MB made an investment into stimulating domestic tourism, essentially knowing that the borders were closed. So those international marketing alliances I mentioned in our partnership in this region, they basically said to the 30 regional tourism organisations, okay, we'll join you up into your IMAs. So that took 30 into 9 groupings that all work together offshore together. So Southern Lakes, for instance, Queenstown, Wanaka, those sorts of guys, us. And then essentially they came up with a model that based on previous international visitor nights, each region got a proportion of funding. And so with our funding, we unlike other regions, some regions chose solely to do what they wanted with their funding. And we made the decision, no, we would be contestable. Was more of a headache, I'll be honest, but we would be contestable, and we made sure that we had our stakeholder partners around the table in terms of decision makers, TCC and Whakatane and Western Bay, and the experience of those event people. And essentially we ran a transparent process that went out to market. People applied. We also partnered with Tech on how we would assess that, because it's not our core business, and Tech has I think TCC now has that same program called Smarty Grants, and we work with them. So it was a very sort of transparent process. Essentially, we went from 60 to 30 to 15 events that were sort of identified. And sorry, to finally answer your question, the funding for those events is spread over 3 years. So, and some of those events, particularly the ones that were closer to sort of the period where they were deferred because of COVID, we're in the process now of renegotiating with them when they're going to put their follow-up event. So essentially at the moment in tidy bookends, it's a 3-year fund for those 15 events. And we're just needing to make sure that now that some of them have had to change, can they still deliver on that? But that's essentially what it is. It's a fixed fund, yeah. And I do want to, again, acknowledge Tech for allowing us to really double down on that 3rd year, which is where the 200,000 from Tech came. Yeah.
Kia ora, Oscar. Thank you. I raised the question earlier about the alignment between the CCOs. And I forgot to actually, and you reminded me around the work that you guys were doing in Mount Maunganui and the Main Street. And I suppose my question, and I think this kind of directed to the others as well, is, great, the alignment between yourselves and us. But also, I think there's opportunities, particularly around the main streets, in terms of the work that you're doing. And so great to hear that come through in terms of the eyesight and the Mount, and the activation and the opportunities there. And I think it's for the others that are still here, just to kind of bear that in mind as well, that there are opportunities, I think, through the main streets across the city. So whether that's in the CBD, the Mount, Greerton, and Papamoa, to take those opportunities when we can.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thanks for your presentation. It's great to see the planning happening for the reopening. It's vital that we realise those opportunities. And it's also great to hear the collaboration that is going on. And, you can see just in the discussion this morning, the potential opportunities between the CCOs. One thing that we've been doing some visiting around the region, seeing some of the sites ourselves, and have enjoyed some fantastic visits out to the various parks across not only the city, but actually the wider sub-region. But in conversations with some of those people that are serving the parks, when you go as a stranger, as I was, really, to realise the opportunity, ask, well, are we promoting this enough? Are we celebrating the tremendous asset that we have, and do people know about it? And the sentiment was that a lot more could be done. And I was just thinking of the link to the trails and the cycleways, to potentially the link to the parks. There's a whole story there. There may well be things happening that I'm not aware of, but I just see that as a potential opportunity, maybe for your consideration if it isn't already on the agenda.
Just to comment on that, absolutely. There's within our Te Hātāpoi strategy, there's 4 key DNA pillars that we identified on the research that we did a couple of years ago. One was horticultural provenance, and that passion group threw around a lot of things, and the reality of one of those outcomes is what we've been talking about today, which is Flavours of Plenty. The other is Māori culture, which we're doing a lot of work in with Carlo and various groups around grabbing that cultural story and narrative so that we can imbue that not just across the region, but also very heavily understand the wayfinding and signage opportunities we've got with the Civic Centre sort of development. And take Copenhagen, take Sydney, take any of those places where you've got really good signage, bollards, walking around, you understand the stories without even trying to. It links everything. The other one is, so the other 2 DNA strands is ocean and beaches, and we've got a lot of blue projects in that space. So we want to really focus on health and well-being, that we can then start championing some of our business events and conferences right through from this region, right through to, even to Waihi and others, which we do have the remit to actually really say, if you're thinking about blue ocean, you're thinking about wellness and well-being, Tauranga and the wider bay is the place to come for those things. So we're thinking there. To your point, the 4th DNA strand is natural landscapes, and that's where we've got quite a big bit of work around many of our PAR sites. You see me reference working with iwi in terms of product enablement, waterfalls and significant sites. So it's really around identifying those, but respectfully, it's also about having the conversation from the start around the propensity and willingness for those people to want to tell those stories and have those people there. So it's on the radar.
Added into that is parks like TECT, that are not necessarily significant just to Māori because of their significant places, or waterfalls. They're active. I mean, TECT is an active park, so it doesn't sort of fit into those 4 pillars somehow. Just that connection for the active recreation parks. I mean, it was interesting at Gordon Spratt yesterday that there were people that visited that for the first time that said, had no idea, that So how do we, and I guess that's part of the collaboration with TCC is promoting that.
I hear you on that. That's the second time you've mentioned that specifically. I remember you mentioning that at the G2G, so I'll make sure that we follow up on that one. Because again, it is quite it's a hidden gem really, in terms of an adventure playground that we don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thank you. And Russ, I would be remiss if I didn't talk to compliment the board. I've been talking about governance. So your board is working particularly well through some very difficult times, again, showing the community what good governance looks like. So well done, and please pass on my congratulations to your chair, who shows great leadership.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you.
Will do.
So what was half an hour has been trebled, but they are significant parts of the city. All three that we've heard from today have had a very difficult time managing as CCOs, as many businesses have through COVID. So I felt it was worthwhile that we have that conversation and allow it to flow. So thank you to the three that have presented this morning, and you did get considerably longer than 10 minutes. Okay, so we have some recommendations to receive the CCO organisation's half-yearly report, receive Bay Venues report on its 6-month performance, Bay of Plenty Local Authority Shared Services, BOPLAS, who didn't present this morning, the Art Galleries Trust, who did, Tourism Bay of Plenty's 6-monthly report, and then the local government funding agencies report on 6 months. So all of those are contained in the appendix. Bills moving and shared seconding. Any further discussion on that? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. So that then brings us to the shareholder feedback to the draft statements of intent. Here they come. Josephine and Anne. They say New Zealand is a very small place, but last night we discovered just how small it was when Anne's son and my sister's daughter, two people that had never met before, we found out they're at university together. Good friends. Yes. Unbelievable.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the draft statements of intent, just a couple of points, and then I'll hand over to Anne regarding the two-way loan. I think the report it covers the group-wide feedback. Last year when we brought you the draft shareholder comments, we weren't able to share it with our colleagues, and this year we were, and we've received quite a bit of feedback from them, which is important given the number of work streams we've got going on around this city. And it was also pleasing to have a brief moment with you to update you on where we felt the shareholder comments should sit. There are very few changes this year. It is minor amendments, probably wordsmithing, I think. Deleting some things that are a little bit unnecessary that, don't meet, and also rewording targets and asking for a little bit more clearer targets into those KPIs, as well as giving us some of those increases across the 3-year lifespan of this statement of intent, of these statements of intent. And as we've just heard, there are still challenges ahead. Just when we thought we were opening the door, we could close it again with another variant. We hope not. But under the circumstances, I think we're in a really good place with the CCOs, 12 months on from when I started in this role. And I just applaud you as much as the way the CCOs have had to endure, because you've spent time with them, you've listened to their challenges, whether it's been around this board table or in another format, and understanding their desires, which I see on a daily basis. They have great vision. And so I thank you for the time that you've taken very much as well. I'll hand over to Anne.
Thanks, Josie. So the second part of this paper is around a two-way loan agreement between Tauranga City Council and Bay Venues, and it's all sort of laid out in the report. It's for obvious reasons, yeah, so that's the second resolution, as well as accepting the feedback to the statement of intent. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anne and Josie, and thank you, Josie. But I think that's why I have commented today on the governance, because I think our CCOs have come a long way over the past 12 months, and they've worked hard. And you're right, they do have great visions, and so they've worked to, in very difficult times, to reshape how they're explaining some of that vision and as I say, demonstrate good governance. I know we've got some of them still here, so I just want to reiterate that we are very keen to see more transparency around those CCOs. They are council-controlled organisations. We are shareholders and on behalf of the ratepayers, and so there is a desire to make sure that we're open and transparent, that people know how their money is being spent. And I know you're working towards it. We gave you a bit of a shock last year when we said we wanted minutes and agendas, but I think there are things that we can do to be much more transparent to the ratepayers about how those organisations are operating, and we'll work together to develop that over time. But other than that, I don't have any questions. Anyone else, Stephen?
I just really wanted to underline that sentiment, and what I've been very encouraged to hear today is the very clear intent and action already happening around alignment with what the council is seeking to achieve, and across the CCOs. There's a potential to tell a really joined up, compelling story there that previously hasn't happened. And that sentiment was coming through in each one of the presentations we had this morning. And I think that's a major opportunity that we're just starting to unravel. So I look forward to next year's 12 months when we'll be talking about a very joined up strategy across all the CCOs, the TCC, and that we're telling our story about how great this region is to everyone, not only the community here, but outside our boundaries as well. So thanks for that, and I think the statements of intent are very much in that direction and vein. We look forward to that developing over the next 12 months. Happy to move the motion.
Yeah, I just want to build on Stephen's comment, and I do think there are opportunities with our main streets in particular. So yes, the alignment between ourselves and the CCOs, but also looking for those opportunities in our working in partnership with our main streets at the same time.
All right. Well, so we are moving. We're receiving the shareholder feedback. We're receiving the draft statements of intent. We're noting that Western Bay of Plenty will be asked to approve the shareholder comments for TBOP, for Tourism Bay of Plenty, and approving the request for an increase of 5 million to the two-way loan agreement between Tauranga City Council and Bay Venues Limited, which takes it up to 30 million. And that's been moved by Stephen and seconded by Bill. Any further discussion on that? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, and thank you to all our CCOs who are still in the room with us. Good to catch up, and we will have a governance to governance coming up soon, I expect. Yep. Okay, thank you. Right, 11.3, executive report. Okay. Do I give you 10 minutes each? Oh, okay. In total? Civic Art Collection, Barbara.
Good morning and thank you. As you can see in the report, there's certainly some work to do in relation to our civic art collection, including refreshing the policy, looking at our systems and valuation. And that work has commenced. But for now, in accordance with our civic art policy, there are 15 pieces of artwork in our collection that the staff feel are no longer appropriate and wish to be removed. There's an appendix which outline those, and they're in and also in the report, there's a list of the reasons why they're no longer appropriate. So we're seeking a resolution from you to have those removed, please.
Reviewing that policy so we don't have politicians deciding on which art is appropriate or not to collect. Thank you.
Sorry, just a question on that one as well. We do have what's it called, decommissioning policy for Tauranga. Can we just make sure that those things are aligned as well? Between the art, the art collection, and also that existing policy.
Barbara, I was just wondering, given the de-accessioning, any opportunity in terms of those works to be in the interim to go up on some of the walls in the library if they were appropriate, given the restrictions that tend to be placed on actually putting artwork up in public spaces? I don't need it. I don't need an answer now, but it was just to raise it for it to be looked at.
Absolutely.
If there was anything appropriate.
I talked to the manager, and congratulations on having to go with that word. That's why I used the word remove. I have talked to the manager of arts and culture, and he'll do whatever is appropriate. If there's anywhere we can display them or give them, we will do so.
Structure group, Nick.
Fantastic. Yeah, so this time we chose to put up a few projects across the group that maybe have generally a smaller profile. So we often go to the Waiari or a big update on Cameron Road or the bigger projects, but I thought this could be interesting for you to see what else is going on at the group. I wanted to run you through. I hope it's generally self-explanatory, but one thing that I didn't think was very self-explanatory was the graph in clause 20. And I'm sorry about that. So I guess I should point out what the various lines are there so that it can make sense to you. So the horizontal red is very high usage, so that's the 50,000 cube that we generally don't want to go over as sort of the limit of our production. Not the hard limit, but that's the warning flag limit. The yellow line below that is what we call high utilization or high usage, and the green line is average usage. And then the up and down red line, that is that utilization 21-22, and the grey line is 2021. So you get a comparison between the 2 years. And the horizontal blue lines are daily rainfall, so you see how they're correlated to the water usage as well. The vertical blue lines. Yep. Did I? Oh, did I? Okay, sorry. Thanks for pointing that out. And then the three boxes on the bottom right hand corner of that graph are water sources, basically indicating low. And I think you can just about work out a yellow line, sort of 2/3 up, and the blue columns there. And the Tautau now is at 26% of the 10-year stream flow average. A rather scary number. And the Wairohi is at 67% of the 10-year stream flow average. The next box is production level, and the third box is daily usage, which is high, so up at around 200 litres per person. which is 25% above the target for this time of the year. So basically, we're kind of just trying to outline the usage versus available water. So that was just for clarification, really, and the rest I hope you could decipher, and happy to take questions.
Just on that water, paragraph 21 says the above dashboard shows our Water Watchers plan is working, and certainly when you look at the usage for this summer with a big campaign compared to last summer, it is clear that people have taken notice. The campaign has been reasonably successful, and people have been quite sensible because we have had a very dry summer. I mean, it has been, and we're still having quite warm days now, and with little rain. Although I think we're heading into quite significant rainfalls in the next couple of days. But so despite the fact that we've gone up above the I don't know, is it an orange line or a yellow line for a large part of the summer, you're still happy that people have the campaign's been reasonably successful?
Yeah, I'd say more than reasonably successful. I think it's been very successful. It was a first for us as well, and the uptake has been really very good across the city. So yeah, hat off to the community who's really taken that on board and started to really treat water as a precious commodity. So it's been really successful for us. So we just really looking forward to how we can work on the successes this year. We're already now planning on how to make it work even better come next summer. So hoping, of course, to cut the ribbon for Waiari before that. So that will add to our capacity. But obviously the trend we're trying to implement now of the utilisation, not just the supply, is the important part here.
Thanks, Nick. Just in terms of the sub-regional long-term system view for water, and understand that our work has started, so collaboration between ourselves, Western Bay and Regional Council. So thinking about our water supplies over the next 30, 50 years. So we've got Waiari coming on, hopefully at the end of the year. But understand there are some challenges with the two current water sources, the Waiorohi and the Toto. And then also understand that the Joyce Road is up for reconsenting in 2026. So I suppose I'm just wanting to get an understanding. So we've got Waiari coming on. These are up for reconsenting. There's and from a 30-year outlook perspective, just wanting to make sure that we've kind of got enough in the tank just to service the community now, but also over the next 30 years. And given the constraints, particularly on those two water sources, you know, what the thinking is long term beyond those two. Yeah, so just kind of wanting some thoughts, I think, you know, long term about water source and supply for Tauranga City over the next 30 years, given the constraints on those two water sources in particular.
So we are reliant on those two water sources, and that's really what's kicked off the work now in collaboration with Western Bay and the Regional Council, so that we understand what affects the Tata, Wairohi and the Waiari, because they are aquifer fed, and we haven't quite got the data and detail and analysis and understanding of how the aquifers get replenished, and that's and how they're connected as well between the three streams. So that's one of the key objectives of this piece of work, and we have the 30-year strategy which has been developed over the last few years, really. But it was only in the last sort of 2 years that we knew that trend was quite drastically going down. So we had 3 years ago, 2 years ago, we had the start of that trend, and it was a blip. A year ago, we realized that it wasn't just a blip, it was going down. And that's when the warning flag went up. And that's how we decided to, we just got to understand this better. And kicked off that piece of work. So between the strategy, the work that we're doing on that collaborative part, and also the freshwater management tool, but between those three, it's a big statement to say that we're sorted, but at least we will understand how the system works a lot better. So there's still a lot of work to do on that before we can be definitive about the supply of water and what it looks like.
And just kind of thinking about that, in terms of the NPSFM, the regional council have a role in terms of managing that, or managing water. But thinking about, what's coming in terms of the, in terms of the fresh NPSFM, the requirement to take into account Te Mano Te Wai, water quality standards, and then Three Waters. I think, just being mindful, I think, that, there are some big changes in terms of the system when it comes to how water will be managed in the future, but making sure that we have sufficient capacity to be able to deal with these supply issues, hopefully longer than 30 years. I think that's probably the point I'm just wanting to make.
You made the observation, I think the last time we had the executive report, that it was always hard to compete with Spaces and Places in terms of the numbers of pictures and good news stories that they had relative to the infrastructure group. And I noticed that there's a lot more pictures in this report, which is actually great to see. And it kind of reminds me of a conversation I had yesterday. We were out at Papamoa markets for the city centre redevelopment project, and one of the ratepayers came up and said to me, "Gosh, you're doing some big work in around Cameron Road. There's all sorts of work around utilities and replacement of water pipes and etc. But I'm not sure that people really understand what's going on there, and the council haven't done a great job of actually telling people what we're doing." And I link that to being out there. We had the billboards for all of the redevelopment up on display. And I wandered at about 9 o'clock, and there was already a clamour of people around the gazebo, and Anne talking to many people. And it was amazing how much interest there was. Well, it certainly amazed me how much interest and engagement there was in the pictures and the story of the civic redevelopment. And I just think, and I see we've got a billboard on one of the projects, but I just think joining all that together, we need to do a much better story in the infrastructure sector about actually what we're doing and why, and what the benefits of that is going to be to the community. I always think of the development sites where a new building is going up, and there's always a billboard there that shows what it's going to look like into the future. And it's amazing the amount of interest I think that people have in understanding what the future is. So just make that observation, because the success of your water campaign clearly demonstrates that when you tell a story, the community is engaging and they are responding. And I think it underlines the opportunity for us to do that a lot better than we have been. So I'll leave that. You don't need to respond, but I just think if there's a need for a comms budget to be expanded to enable that to happen, I think it's actually essential that we do that, because that's how we take the community with us on these investments that we're making.
So, Nick, in terms of the infrastructure plan, did that actually indicate the need for storage and things like that at some point in time? When I'm talking about storage, I'm not talking about reservoirs, I'm talking about much larger storage facilities. Given the challenges that are certainly emerging in terms of our current water sources.
That is a good point, and that is often how cities ensure their supply. So the way our system is built is much more hand to mouth. So basically, we take it out of the stream, we treat it, and we put it onto the network. So our limitation until we've seen this trend going down has been the treatment of the water rather than the availability. Now that's shifted. So as we look into, you know, with a tripartite and the partnership now with Western Bay and regional council, those sorts of things in terms of you know, dams or, you know, storage and do we need to draw on another type of supply rather than the spring fed, that is going to be part of that as well.
So at the other end of the spectrum in terms of the tap, so our current, was it 200 litres per person? I'm not sure, how does that measure up, say, against a Hamilton in terms of the individual use?
I couldn't tell you from the
okay.
my head.
Well, where I'm heading is that, is it appropriate now, and you guys may be looking at it, but in terms of, say, new subdivisions, new development, are we getting to the stage where we need systems that actually use grey water or use grey water on the grass, in the gardens or whatever? Are we getting of having some dual systems in place, given that, and with all the pressures on water courses, with national policy direction on the use of water, it's become a, you know, more and more a valuable resource.
Yeah, that's right. So that is as the supply has sort of diminished now, that's something we need to look at as well. You know, finding other sources and, you know, rainwater tanks, etc. That's you know, it's been done in a lot of other places, and that's something we should be looking at as well.
But also, whether we need some dual systems and new development, so instead of all the water going down the plug.
So we did have a bit of a look at this probably 4 years ago now, 3 years ago with Becca. So Auckland City Council had looked at this exact issue about do you have some dual systems or do you require people to put tanks, water tanks in new developments? The issue is, and it could be further explored now given our water situation is different from when we did it, but the key finding at that point, both for Auckland and for Tauranga, when Becca looked at it, was that you need to provide your water network for when you've got your shortage, which is basically over the summer seasons where you've got drought. And generally in those periods of time, we actually stop people watering their gardens and a lot of those reuse items anyway. But your base requirement is won't be helped through those periods of time where you've got your summer peak drought season. So you might do it for lots of other reasons in terms of encouraging sustainability, etc. But in terms of will it reduce the water use through those times of the year, which is also the time of the year where we've got the problem with the consented supply, it probably won't make enough of a difference was what that study concluded. But again, given our circumstances have changed, it could be worth a relook. And Auckland, as I say, had come to the same conclusion that it wasn't the answer. So they were looking at it because of the shortages that they had up in Auckland.
I think there is a growing, certainly conversations out in the community, we're often asked about particularly the use of grey water, not just on new developments, but also retrofitting houses. And I think I raised it a couple of months ago, whether we as a council could do something on a bigger scale, on a bigger purchase scale that gave an opportunity for residents to do that for themselves, to put in maybe rainwater tanks or grey water tanks to reuse in their gardens and on their sites. I know that Whakatane Council some time ago purchased a large order of compost bins and made them available to the community at a reduced price, and I just thought something like that might be helpful, because there's a lot of people that are wanting to take control of some of that themselves. How many they are, I don't know, but I think it's certainly something perhaps our sustainability team could be having a look at for us, and then maybe re-look at from development.
Take that away, thank you.
Anything else? Yeah, I'm just conscious that we need to keep moving.
Sorry, I do have another question, not on water. Transport on Monganui Road. I think this project started before we came on, and it's fully underway. And appreciate all the work that's been done towards Blake Park, and from a amenity point of view, looks amazing. But we're working on the next sections. And I haven't, I have been onto the website and had a look at some of the schemes, but just wanted to make sure, thinking about trees along this section of the corridor from Golf Road through to is it Tay Street? I can't remember. Sorry, Hull Road, or that next sections, those next 2 or 3 sections. Just wanting to make sure that we're thinking about planting and thinking about trees, shade, those kinds of things as we're progressing through.
Yes, I can maybe provide you with some plans of what is planned for that section to give you a feel for it. Thank you. But it's the point of the project is to create a similar environment to what has already been done, so that you don't have that sort of motorway widths that encourages unsafe behaviour often. Thank you.
All right, Arts Community Services, Barbara.
Thank you. Obviously, the highlight of our month has been the opening of He Puna Manoa, and it's absolute credit to Mike and Joanna and the team as to how it looks and the feel, and we're getting compliments from everybody, and the staff are absolutely overjoyed to be working in such an environment. But we've also had a tour of our Heritage Hub. That happened on Saturday. We had 50 people turn up for the tour. Overwhelmingly positive feedback. So in response to that, there's another 2 days being put into the schedule, and so they'll be on the 21st, 22nd and 23rd of this month. These tours are quite resource hungry, but James and the team are looking to see how they can offer more tours throughout the year. So we'll keep you informed on how that can happen. The other highlight, I think, is just following up from what we've heard from our CCOs as well, is that the events team have been extremely busy responding to organising events. They've had a lot of, I think it's 350 contacts at the moment, and getting more every day. So they've been very, very busy. Indoor, not so much, but we're hoping that that'll get a bit of traction soon. So we're gearing up to ensure that we can be ready for those inquiries. And I've just picked up, and I think in the whole 3 weeks I've been here, is those linkages and how important they are, but also the complexities of the linkages and the number of people that are involved in all of these activities. It's a bit overwhelming at the moment, but we'll certainly get our head around that and make sure that we're working with our community as much as we can. Just one other comment I made, sorry, just going back to that civic art. One thing I did forget to say is that wherever possible, we would offer that art back to whoever donated it to us as well. So happy to try and answer a question, but I've got Gareth sitting here as well, so if I can't, I'm sure he can.
I'm glad you mentioned the events team, because I know it's been a really difficult time for them. And some highlights, well, of course, has to be the women's cricket, but it was frustrating because it could have been so much better, and it was going to be so much better, but COVID got in the way, and so we missed a fantastic opportunity. But they did a tremendous job anyway. And I was talking to someone at one of these LTPA meetings, community meetings, who had no idea that the Tauranga City Council was involved in that, in staging it. They thought that the international cricket people did it all. And I said, well, no, on the ground, all of that is managed by TCC. So they were extremely complimentary. But again, it's so many people don't understand the enormous range of work that the council undertakes, and they do a great job.
Yes, Nalita and I were just talking about that this morning. How do we actually market not only ourselves as a city, but also ensuring that our community knows, what we're doing and what their ratepay fund is supporting. So we will put some energy into that.
I knew it at the time, but there is a lot of distance between Grant Robertson and me in that photo. And that's probably because I was asking him for a heap of money.
Thanks, Barbara. Just got a couple of questions. On page 31, para 56, the Matapihi Po, along Matapihi Road, is this back towards B2B? Because I understand that through the B2B project, NZTA or Waka Kotahi usually do kind of cultural recognition elements, and whether that's kind of aligned or tied in with that.
Sorry, Chair, the team don't know. I'll get you the answer.
Okay, no, that's cool. And then the next one is about libraries, and we've opened He Puna Manoa and displaying some of the taonga there. Whether there's capacity in some of our other libraries to do something similar, to be able to tell the stories, to kind of warm people up to, this is what we're doing in the city, hopefully before we get to the Civic Precinct development. So other opportunities, I think, to be able to display taonga.
Absolutely, and we'll certainly research those.
Just a quick acknowledgement on the way past in terms of the new dedicated cool room. Stephen and I went there last week. For me, in terms of the obligations we have in terms of preserving our archives and our history. I don't know whether we've necessarily done that particularly well in the past, but I think in terms of setting the scene for that in terms of in the future. So really, thanks to the team. Just wanted to check, in paragraph 59, you talk about Kāinga Tupu has provided a partnership opportunity with Smart Growth regarding the housing dashboards. No issue with that at all. Just wanted to check that information will become public, because some of the dashboard information, Smart Growth, is in confidence for very good reasons. I just was checking on this housing one, didn't get sucked up into that part of it. So not for now, but just to look at. And it would be good at some point in terms of noting the Coolum Park upgrades. It's just about there. In terms of any lessons from that would be appropriate to share with commissioners in terms of the process and approach in the future for other upgrade projects.
All corporate services.
Thank you and good afternoon. Just in terms of the operational areas of corporate services, so Marine Precinct continues to be pretty quiet. It is an industry thing around the entire country at the moment. There was a lot of work done in the early days of COVID in terms of vessel refurbishments and so forth, but it has very much dried up. So the team are working pretty hard in terms of marketing, with a real focus on the next summer season in terms of getting boats up onto the hard stand with that. Also just been a reset of the pricing lists, which will favour more of the smaller lifts in particular, in terms of the way we're actually pricing them up. So that should bring in some additional work. And our picture of we did have one picture, which is Bridge Wharf, which is now doing the refurbishment of that. It's very much the first stage until we're actually clear of the ultimate direction, but that work is underway at present. Airport, very similar, quiet with the exception of Christchurch, continues to go very well, well ahead of pre-COVID levels in terms of load factors coming through there. So that's the good news story from there. Obviously, with borders opening, we hope to see some more increase there, but certainly I think there's a fairly conservative approach to actually increasing the timetable through with Air New Zealand at this point in time. Legal and commercial team are doing a lot of work in terms of supporting the business in terms of capital program, particularly from a construction risk perspective. So that work is continuing. Digital, probably a couple of big things in there. One is the SAP finance upgrade, which means a lot of sleepless nights, in short, as finance upgrades tend to be. But the team's got a very good approach to that, and we'll work that through over the next few months. And then also the team's working closely with the comms team in terms of looking at how we can use more digital channels for reaching out to our community. I'll take any questions.
Nothing. They were interesting statistics though, the land parcels work. Very interesting. See what's continuing to see growth. Strategy and growth. Christy.
No pictures from me. Just a few topics there. Really, just the only one I want to bring to your attention is the request for a reduction in the IAF application. We only received that in respect to Te Papa, not the other two, which is the Papamoa East Interchange and the Tauranga West projects. We are still experiencing quite a lot of trouble aligning the IAF, the IFF and Wakakatahi funding, and Paul and I are continuing to work on that. It is like trying to thread a needle through. It's pretty hard, but we will keep working on that. And so by the time we come back with the deliberations report, we should have the KO decisions, we should have some direction or otherwise as to the extent to which Wakakatahi can confirm their funding, and you'll have your feedback from the community. So that will be a key decision point to actually decide, are these projects proceeding and what funding sources are you going to rely on and what is available.
They only gave you 4 days to actually do the reduction, which is pretty helpful, how they expect to get. I mean, we're talking millions and millions of dollars across the country, and how they expect to get good decisions made is beyond me, but however. Any questions?
Just a comment, really. I mean, the complexity of these application processes are all put in place to ensure good value for money. I suspect that the inverse is the actual outcome, because the complexity is so tortuous that and when you get 4-day requests for reduction so that they can share it across the country, which is effectively the justification, clearly shows you that the system's actually not prioritising those investments that are best value for the country. Beggars belief, to be frank, and the only good news is commissioners have made very clear representation to ministers on those issues, so hopefully such initiatives into the future might be simplified. Share your frustration.
People engagement.
Mine's just, good afternoon, everybody. Just probably a very brief update around the Local Government Commission, the termination of representation review. You will be aware that that's come back and endorsed the council's position, which is
very good,
very great, and reflect on the work that was done there. So that's the only update I have. Any questions? Yeah,
I was just going to make comment to the Democracy Services team. They did a fantastic job. I think we did get a lot of comment from the community. I think I was explaining the process to someone who seemed to have missed it completely. But we did go out to the public twice and we had hearings. It is a funny process where someone sitting outside the commission who are completely remote make the final decision, but I think it's good to know that they understood what we were trying to achieve, and I think that was helped. The staff did a fantastic job preparing both us and I think the public and then the commission for their final decision. So well done to the staff. Bill.
On the epidemic preparedness notice, so that's extended to 17 June. It provides flexibility in terms of using audio and visual links. Is there an intention to get beyond 17 June 2022 for that notice? Is there any work happening? Is government looking at extending that?
Actually, we had a question last time. It was due on the 18th of March. I think we're on the 14th of March, and we were, is it going to change unless they extended it last minute? But I understand that there is certainly discussions happening around actually this is a way to modernise meetings totally going forward. It's been great, and people, I think it's a part of the change way of working for us. But I'm not aware of exactly where that's at. But certainly that's I know Coral and I have had a couple of discussions around it, and that would be our feedback, and I'll chase that up to see.
Very supportive of it.
Right to the Minister of Local Government. Where are we up to? Regulatory and compliance.
Kia ora koutou. I just want to draw your attention to a few things. An IANZ audit, very exciting stuff, and in true audit fashion, we've made it sound all doom and gloom. It's actually a really positive outcome there. Not to not have to deal with IANZ again for 3 years for our food licensing team is a real credit to their skills and their knowledge in the area. Emergency management, note that you've got a recommendation there to appoint a new recovery manager, Paula Nordair. It's just a new additional manager in case we need to draw on her skills. Building, we had massive volumes in December and January, but thankfully February's been low. Our timeframe compliance is down, but I'm confident we're going to see that going back up again. Thankfully, we're in a good position to have the relatively small backlog compared to to last year. We've taken on a stack of additional contractors and are working hard to squeeze some blood out of the proverbial stone. And lastly, environmental planning, we can count on them to provide some pictures. And while their volumes remain high, I just really liked the graphic they had at the back of their set. Put people before process, make it easy, and get stuff done. I think that sums up regulatory really well.
Any questions? Chad.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, I've just got one question. I did sit in on the Civil Defence Emergency Management Governance Group meeting a few weeks ago, and we're having a discussion about tsunami awareness. And I thought, I mean, in terms of the work that we did over the Christmas period using not volunteers, but the ambassadors to get out there and engage with the community about preparedness. Whether it would be useful, because I did mention the work that we had done, to present something back to the committee about the work that we had done over that period.
That's a great idea. We should be shouting that from the rooftops.
Couple of quick comments, Chair. Really pleased, Steve, in terms of you pulling all the levers in terms of that building consenting process. It's probably fair to say if there's a comment that I get on a regular basis, it is around building consents and the expectation that people have. So yeah, delighted on that focus. And yes, I thought our promise to you from environmental planning, I think, commend the team in terms of focusing on the people as opposed to just that very long and laborious process that we all have to go through when we apply, but certainly that people focus. And I've had some good comments around that.
Nothing else? Okay, so the recommendation is that we receive the executive report, approve the recommendation to formally de-accession 15 items from the Civic Art Collection, and approve the appointment of Paula Norday, is it Norday, as Emergency Management Recovery Manager. Bill moving and Stephen seconding. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. And if Shad's wife and my husband don't get through the museum Tauranga collection tour, we're going to be in deep, deep trouble. So I'm pleased to hear that you've got another couple of dates because the other ones are all full. Okay, that brings us to the Greaton Marawaewae study update. Yeah, I think we'll, well, what do you think? We've got 10 minutes to lunch, and we've got Greaton, dog fees and a parking bylaw. Why don't we just plough on through and finish it and then have lunch and then come back and do well, actually we've got, yeah, and we'll come back and do the, how does that sound? Happy with that? Okay, Greaton, no, Elizabeth. Kia ora.
I think so. You've got, yeah.
All right, Carl's on
screen.
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou.
So I'll just do a bit of an introduction and then hand it over to Elizabeth. So through the long-term plan, the Commission has passed a resolution to proceed with an option study for the Greaton Racecourse site, and your direction was to look at a whole range of options. So this is a report back of that process, which has been underway for some months. So prior to Christmas it started. So the purpose of this meeting is, this report is to provide you the feedback from the community engagement process, which has been going over sort of a 4 or 5 month period, and also the consultant's multi-criteria option assessment, which has been done. We're not seeking any decisions at this meeting. It is a reporting back of the progress of the project, and then to get your support to go and have some further conversations with the existing users on the site to talk through both the feedback and the assessment, with the view that we would come back in June with a recommendation report for you to make a decision. So we're just reporting it back in stages. So Elizabeth will work through the community engagement, and then Carl will cover the multi-criteria analysis output.
On. Kia ora koutou katoa. So I'm here on behalf of the consultant team that was pulled together to deliver on this project, on the study. Really what we want to do is just run through a little bit around the engagement outcomes, the option development, and then the analysis, and then we'll talk about some next steps. So I'm just going to do the engagement part up front, highlighting that the purpose of the Greaton Marawaewae study, as Christine said, is to identify opportunities that will support wellbeing livability across the city in the short, medium and long term. And I suppose a sub-purpose was to provide clarity to the existing users about the future of the reserve land at the racecourse. And we took that quite seriously in our project brief. Next slide, please, Carl. Thank you. So the community engagement was a huge part of this project because it was made clear to us that we need to bring the community along on a conversation to think about the future of the use of the reserve land, rather than coming in and saying, here's some options that we could be done with it. So we started out by wanting to bring together the widest range of community views that we could, including those from existing users, and that would inform the decision making on the use of the reserve land. So our objectives covered the fact that we would get as wide a representation of people as possible. Christine's just handing out the options document that we've prepared for you. One of the key points of our engagement was to be listening, not counting. And what that means is it's not about a numbers game. It's not something where we said, we want votes on these options. We want to know whether you think this is the best idea or that's the best idea. We actually just kept our ears open and listened to what the community said based on some questions, which I'll pose to you shortly. We also knew that the wider context of the city needs needed to be factored in. So what would be the need for future open spaces in the city, what transport opportunities were being offered, particularly around mode of shift in this area that perhaps need to be considered in the future considerations. And what other things could we be thinking about in terms of recreation space? Obviously, housing as a need in the area was one of those wider context of city needs. We went into it with no preconceived ideas. That's probably the key point. And we ran it from November through to March. Next slide, please. Right from the outset, the project team or study team sought input from mana whenua, and there have been ongoing conversations to this end, and they will continue after today and for many years to come, I'm sure, around what needs to be done with the space from mana whenua's perspective. But they've made it very clear that they have a strong desire to keep it as a recreation space. And if there were going to be any ownership, any issues around change of use from reserve status, they would want to be having further conversations with the Crown about that ownership. Next slide, please. So just quickly through the community engagement overview, phase 1, which ran from the 2nd of November through to Christmas, so that was a full 6 to 7 weeks. The question we asked then was, what would be the best use of this reserve land in the future? And what we were trying to do was prompt people to give us ideas, not just around the status quo, and we got plenty of people saying we just want it to stay the way it is and we want it to be a race course and a golf course and equestrian, but also prodding them as to what might be the best use of this reserve land, not if those things weren't there, but in addition to, or if you look at this land in the context of where it sits in the city, which is pretty much in the centre of the growing city, what might the best use be? And so we prodded and got lots of feedback on that. And there's a little bit of feedback information up there. Next slide, please. From Christmas to the 7th of March, we actually released the first of the 7 options document, which you've all seen. And the question we asked there was, which of these 7 options do you prefer and why? And again, it wasn't a numbers game. It wasn't asking people to vote on them. We actually asked them to drill down into what those their thoughts were on those options and what they thought was good about them, what they thought was stink about them, and to tell us where we might have got things wrong and other things they'd like to see. So we got quite a lot of feedback, as you can see, during that phase. The most interesting part of this process was the in-person feedback, probably, because when we got the opportunity to have kanohi to kanohi, face-to-face with people, and they could really explore some of those options, they often shifted from one to another option because they were able to ask questions and sort of tease it out about, why would you put a hospital there? Or houses, we don't want to use this green space for houses, but where else would they go? So there were lots and lots of conversations like that, but also a huge amount of feedback where people said, we love this green space, we want it to stay the way it is, and it is something that we currently use and enjoy, so don't take away our green space. And that comes through quite strongly in the next little summary I'm going to give you when we get there. Next slide, please. The feedback from existing users was also quite clear. Racing Tauranga, they favoured options 1 and 2, which were status quo and enhanced status quo, and really wanted an extension to the current lease term. They do support greater community use of the reserve, but they want to maintain its present user activities. The Tauranga Golf Club, keen to retain the old 18-hole golf course, obviously, with more security of long-term tenure. They said they could work with the council on any of the options 1, 2, 3 and 7, which we'll explain shortly, and happy to create some kind of a memorandum of understanding that would formalise greater use or access to the golf course for walkers, cyclists and people who wanted to enjoy more green space. And TESA is the Tauranga Equestrian Sports Association, which represents 9 different user groups around ponies and horse activities. They really just wanted to retain their existing space on the racecourse or expand it if possible. Next slide, please. So summarised, again, when I was saying it's not a numbers game, we can really only use expressions of people's feelings about what they wanted, as well as picking up all of that 1,500 or so pieces of feedback we got. And off the back of that, these are the expressions that we have summarised as a consultant team of the community. So we had extremely strong support for retaining and/or creating a multi-purpose destinations green space for the city and for improved access to Kuparirua Valley. Now, interestingly, that strong support comes from people who wanted the status quo to remain as well, largely expressed as, this is already green space, don't take it away from us, no to housing, no to taking away the things that we already enjoy. And so there was a huge amount that just sort of backed up this feeling that people wanted to retain a green space in the centre of the city, even those who naturally wanted to retain things the way they were. Very strong support for creating active recreational spaces and for other community amenities. And this included telling the cultural story of the site. So what is the history of this reserve land and what happened before European people came here? Because it has a wonderful history in terms of the Marawaewae, the fact that it was a garden and a community garden, if you like, for iwi and hapu that fed people from all around New Zealand when they were all around Aotearoa, probably just the North Island actually, but people who came here, and it's a lovely story that needs to be told. And then also people wanted us to provide a multicultural community centre on that site. And that came through really clearly from our multicultural and ethnic communities when they came and spoke to us. There was some support for relocating the racecourse if a suitable location can be secured. And there was some support for relocating equestrian if a suitable location could be found, but also not much support for relocating the golf course. And that was probably for two reasons. One was apart from the obvious, one was because it is definitely perceived more as green space because of the trees and the fact that it's closer to Kuparirua Valley where people, there's that accessibility. And the other reason was potentially the cost, like how do you move a golf course? And that came through quite strongly. There was limited support for housing on the reserve land, although more support for option 6, which had more housing, than for option 5, which had less housing, which was interesting. And that was really because for those who did support housing, they really supported housing. A desperate need in Tauranga for housing. Obviously, the council has identified, over 1,200 new houses are needed a year. And this is one of the places that some people could see would be an ideal location. So housing support for that. And then some support for a public health precinct and a future hospital facility. But again, this is one of those areas where when you got a chance to talk to people or they had a chance to come and talk to the consultant team or to the Tauranga City Council staff, when this idea was raised with them, well, if you had the hospital here, you could potentially put houses where the hospital is. The support for it grew quite remarkably, and people were going, that's a far better idea than having houses here. We'd rather that they went in closer to the city centre, and this would be a perfect location for a hospital. But that was one of those tricky ones where you had to actually be talking or listening to people to actually tease it out rather than just saying, here's a whole range of two-dimensional options to choose from. So that's just a quick summary of the community feedback. And now I think Carl is going to run you through some of the option information just to bring you up, just remind you really of where we've come from, and then talk about the process that we went through to get to the next phase. Over to you, Carl.
All right. Kia ora koutou. Thanks, Elizabeth. So I'll pick up and just run through briefly the 7 options that went out first, and then cover that further option development, and then also how the options were assessed by the consultant team and where the findings are landing to date. So in December, the study team...
Sorry to interrupt, Carl, but can you quickly go through this? I think we're quite au fait with the 7 options.
Okay.
And we're really more interested in the analysis that was done. But so certainly go through the 7 options and then the 3+, but quite rapidly so that we could focus on the analysis.
Yes, we'll do, Anne. Yes. Okay. So 7 options that it went out first, just very briefly, headlining those. Option 1, status quo. Option 2, the status quo but enhanced, so with enhanced community activities. Option 3, looking at community spaces, active recreation with golf and equestrian retained, so that would see the relocation of racing. Option 4 is really moving to a park type approach with community spaces, active recreation combined with equestrian, but seeing the relocation of both golf and racing. Options 5 and 6 look at the inclusion of residential. So option 5, retaining the golf course and with 700 to 1,000 new homes, and also potential provision of a school. Option 6, similar, but sees the both racecourse and golf and also equestrian relocated with a larger amount of housing and also open space. And then option 7, and this really, I guess the importance or the noteworthy around this was that the DHB contacted us through the first phase of engagement around the interest to look at a health precinct on the site. So this option was created following that feedback. So retains golf with a hospital or health precinct and active recreation. So these were the options that went out in the first instance for community engagement. Following that engagement, but also following further technical analysis from the consultant team, particularly around elements such as looking at stormwater, taking into account more feedback or more engagement with the DHB around their health precinct needs, and also, I guess, understanding some of the broader community desires over the site. These 3 additional options called plus options were developed. So for options 3, 6, and 7. So in terms of option 3 plus, the key changes to this one, so effectively these plus options are added into the mix on top of the other 7. So the key changes here were retaining golf, but looking at the relocation of both racing and equestrian. So the key change being the equestrian. And that was because through ongoing engagement with equestrian, I guess we found that really there's an incompatibility of activities, particularly when you're starting to reduce the equestrian area quite significantly. This option, and as well as the other plus options, also take into account additional community aspirations such as multicultural community centre, more sports activities, and elements such as passive and active space, further event space, and so forth. Option 6 plus, so the tweaks to option 6, the key change here is the response to the stormwater. So that's in that corner up close to Greaton, where some space has been allowed for stormwater attenuation. The key change here is it reduces the potential residential by around 200 dwellings overall. Generally, and this option stays the same in regards to the other elements. And last but not least, option 7 plus. So following further engagement with District Health Board, we saw the slight reduction of the health services site area from 14 hectares to 12 hectares, and also the possibility to move that around slightly. So what you see here is that rather than interfering with the golf holes in the Barks Corner area, we're able to move that those health services up a little bit, and then also co-locate with those sports activities. So that was the key change in that option. So I won't run through this in detail, except to say, I guess what you see in terms of what retains and what is retained and what moves on is that options 1 and 2 retain racing, but 3 to 7 look at the relocation. In relation to golf, you have 7 out of 10 options retaining golf, and then 4 out of 10 options retaining the equestrian. So in terms of the assessment process, I guess the key challenge was, and it was a challenge that we set ourselves from the start, was to generally look at and take into account the community engagement responses for each option, and then also assess this alongside the technical assessment and the needs for the city. So I guess going back to what Elizabeth's talked through, the assessment has really looked to take into account all that feedback that she's talked through. It is a technical process. We've used best practice multi-criteria option assessment to undertake that assessment. And really what that means is that, we're identifying the key elements that need to be assessed and weighting those against each other to move forward. And we've also tested the outcomes through a number of weighting scenarios. So effectively scenario testing, a type of sensitivity testing. The multi-criteria assessment or the assessment was undertaken looking at a matrix type approach. So if you can kind of imagine on the horizontal side, the needs of the city and the existing users were outlined. What we put forward for these was the need for a health site, and this was weighted at 20%. And that's really taking into account a clear understanding that the existing hospital site does face challenges going forward. While redevelopment could occur on the site, looking at alternative site locations makes good sense. But if you think about the city in terms, there's actually quite limited sites available for that type of redevelopment. So that was afforded a reasonably high weighting of 20%. Provision of green space. Now that takes also into account, I guess, the strong feedback that we're getting from the community, but also the fact that as our city grows, green space, both for active and passive recreation, will be key to supporting healthy growth. So that was afforded a weighting of 25 to 30%, depending on the scenario. I think we all understand the city housing needs. In Te Papa alone, we're looking at an additional 15,000 residents over the next 30 years. So that affords a weighting of 25 to 30%, depending on the scenario. The existing user requirements, I think we certainly recognise the ongoing needs and the value that those uses bring to the community, but we also need to recognise the potential for relocation within our wider environment. So they've been afforded a weighting of 10%. Net costs, so this was considered, or the assessment was considered with costs and without costs, and the relative weighting of 15 to 20% generally given through the scenarios. And just noting that if you go any higher than that, it starts to skew the outcomes. So in looking at all those matters, they were then looked at against the technical and engagement outcomes of the work to date. So again, in particular, the community engagement and where that sat. So how did that weigh up against each of those needs? The need for those activities to occur on the site. So for example, indicate, as noted, the health precinct probably has a limited number of sites that could occur on within the city. And also taking into account the broader strategic direction our city is taking. So the central Te Papa Peninsula location, the investment in projects such as Cameron Road, and also I guess the growth that is anticipated within the Te Papa Peninsula generally and as a central location. So as I said, each option was marked with and without costs, and a number of scenarios were undertaken. What we found is, in terms of ranking these, option 7+ ranked top in all scenarios, and both with and without costs. The same goes for option 6+, so homes and community park. And then in the third and fourth ranking, we found that options 4 and 3+ were coming through top across the scenario, across all scenarios there. But obviously, as you can see on the screen there, with costs, option 4 ranked slightly higher, and without costs, and with costs, option 3+ ranked slightly higher. I guess what is key within this is that the options that included racecourse don't come through within the top 4 ranking. which leads on to the next slide, and that is acknowledging, I guess, the needs of racing within our region, and just noting that we are engaging with New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing. And as outlined in their reporting, New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing has met with Racing Rotorua and Racing Tauranga and encouraging them to work together. And that's really in taking into account that it's New Zealand Thoroughbreds Racing's view that one racing location is required in this area of the Bay of Plenty. So taking that in, having that in regard, and the emerging outcomes of this study, it's considered appropriate to establish a cross-organisational working party to identify potential sites for a sub-regional racing facility. Key to that would be a lead role by New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing, and also including other stakeholders, including Tauranga Racing, because key to that study will be understanding and responding appropriately to their needs. So that's really sums up where we're at. I think we've suggested that we push any decision making out to June of this year, and the key reason being to allow further opportunity to meet with and receive further feedback from mana whenua and existing users as we move this project forward. So I'll hand it back to the room there, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Carl. That's helpful because that's quite a complicated process that you went through. And I noticed that in the scenarios you changed around some of those weightings to test them a number of times, which is always helpful because the weightings can be subjective and how you envisage it. So I was just thinking about this, and I guess underlying it is a bit of a concern that Elizabeth, we really only got about 1,500 odd people taking part in the process, and so it sort of worries me that this is quite a significant process for the area, and so two things. First of all, we don't have to rush it. And the intention is that this now people can see where it's got to with certainly with the analysis that's been done. We've got the opportunity to work with New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing, and I'm delighted that both Tauranga Racing and Rotorua Racing have indicated they are talking and prepared to work with New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing. So I just wonder if all of that work's happening, and we are going to continue talking with mana whenua, if all of that is happening, whether we get to a preferred option or options and then have another public process where it's open to people to come and we hold hearings so that there is a sort of a formal process. Now, I know that often gets just a particular group of people who have the time and the energy to go through, but I just wonder whether we don't need another extension of, we might end up with those four options that then we get people to come and talk to us about before we make a final decision. That might give us a bit more time because we don't have to rush this decision. There's no urgency around it. That will give time for the racecourse to have their engineers report on their seismic reporting on their grandstand, and for maybe some further development with the New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing. So I just wonder whether we give ourselves a bit more time, and B, another opportunity for the public to have some input into, what is a really long-term thinking for the Bay, and at the same time for the health services, because they're going through quite a considerable process. So another couple of months might actually give us a bit more information and help with that decision. But in the meantime, what we have to do today is receive the report, thank everyone for the work that they've done, thank everyone who's participated, particularly the users that I think have entered into the discussions in good faith. I'm glad to hear you make the point that we started this process in order to give some certainty to those current users who had raised it with us, that they don't have perpetual leases. There is a finite time. If they want to invest capital in their facilities, then they need to have that certainty of long-term tenure. And of course, the area is in the Ufti spatial plan and the Te Papa spatial plan identified for housing. So there's a great deal of uncertainty for those existing users, and that was the promise that we made to them, that we would go through this process and get them some certainty. So all we're doing today really is receiving the report and starting out with a little bit more consultation. But that's my thoughts on that. I don't think we need a resolution because we're nowhere near it, but we're just thinking about how we might ensure that people get every opportunity to give us their thoughts. Bill?
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge the work of the consultant team and staff in terms of where we have got to today and the provision of this information and the analysis undertaken, and picking up your point, Elizabeth, moving away from that what often is a local government obsession with the numbers game. So I think what the team has outlined today and the analysis undertaken certainly provides me with a degree of confidence in terms of how the engagement's been undertaken in those two phases, and then the work that's been undertaken, how do we actually consider and analyse the input we've had. So just like to acknowledge all of that process, and given the process to date, Chair, I think there is some mileage in terms of looking at some type of subsequent process, including hearings and that type of thing, because given the robustness to date, I think that would provide actually a very good model also potentially in the future when we are faced with some of these types of issues.
Bill said exactly just what I was going to say. I think it's been a good process and one which is much more open-minded. I really liked the no preconceptions. I remember going to a meeting with the racecourse, and one of the members there said, "Oh, you've already made up your minds," and actually that is not the case, and this process has demonstrated that is not the case. What we want to do is come to a decision that's in the best interests of the community and the city as a whole. And I really like your suggestion, Chair, that we test that further with another round of more formal consultation. One of the questions I was going to ask of Elizabeth is how representative she felt the input that we have had has been of that wider community view, because one of the downsides of the formal processes is we often get a quite narrow view expressed by particular groups, and it's right and proper that they get their opportunity to do that. No question about that. But I also think that somewhere in the system we need to make sure that we're getting a broader view of the wider community, and particularly the silent majority that so often never have their say. So I'm thinking about how we do that formal process. I'm wondering whether there might be some sort of representation survey or perhaps representative focus groups, whatever, where we could capture and test that we have the wider consensus along with whatever decision we finally come to. So those are just some thoughts for thinking about how we do this process.
you. Thanks, Elizabeth and Carl, for the work that you guys have done, and the team. I think a number of us did head out to Greaton and did attend some of the drop-ins and had good conversations with people. I do think you're right in terms of particularly option 7. A lot of people didn't quite understand what that was and what that meant. So it was quite useful having those one-on-one conversations with people. But yeah, I do want to support the approach that we do take a little bit more time with the community to kind of step this through. Yeah, in that first meeting, people were concerned that we were just going to rush into this and make a decision and then move on. Yes, there's demands for housing. Yes, there's demands for health facilities. Yes, there's demands for green space, and we need to balance up all of those considerations to come to a decision that sees to the needs of the community now, but also for the next, potentially over the next 20 to 30 years, particularly around green space as well. I do like the, in terms of the feedback and what's come through in terms of the reports, connecting the space, particularly down into the valley. I think that's quite important. For all the options, I think that came through, and I think we can manage that in terms of all the options. So that's a good thing. I think that's come through. But yeah, I do support the approach that we do take a little bit more time, and particularly around a number of options to put in front of people, and then continue the conversation.
Thank you. So I'm happy to move A, B, and then just to change to D, that we note that a full report and recommendation for the preferred options will be provided to council in June 2022. Be added, and so I'm happy to move that, so it's clear that we're not making a final decision in June. You're happy to second that? And I think by then, yes, Stephen, sorry. I think by then too, we might be able to work up some, because one of the things that picked up from what Elizabeth was saying, people need to know what happens if you displace someone. Is there a place for them? So we might be able to work up some of that too, so that there are options. I don't know about where we might put a golf course, but certainly we've got some ideas around the Tessa in particular, who disappear, and who knows where New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing might get the 2 racing clubs. So anyway, so I've moved and Stephen's second. Shad.
Sorry, just one other comment. I'm just mindful that Ngāi Tamarawaho, we also need to continue the conversation with them. They have lodged a claim, and we do need to be respectful of that, but also to be open and transparent, and to be able to engage with them through this process as well. So
B is that we undertake further engagement with mana whenua. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Do you want to break for lunch now, and we'll come back and do dog fees and bylaws? And thank you, Carl and Elizabeth. Thank you very much for all the work. It's great.
Good up. Thanks, everyone.
Do you want to do dog fees? Yeah, let's do some dog fees. You happy to move? Shad seconded. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Except, look at that.
Good work, Nigel.
Good work. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That's and the other one is the traffic and parking bylaw, and notice that we're moving some of the we're making way. Here's Brendan. By the time he gets here, we will have done it. I wondered why you're sitting at the back there. Adjusting some of the interim bus spaces and places, parking places in the CBD.
Correct. This basically sets us up for the temporary CBD facility, so that moves them from Willow Street up onto Durham Street. And there's a few other minor changes where residents have requested no stopping or so forth, but it's primarily around the temporary interchange.
Police parking spots. Yeah. Stephen moved, Shad seconded. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. So we'll move into public excluded.
So fast, she missed it.
Bill's moved and Stephen seconded that we go into public excluded for the reasons outlined in the agenda. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried.